Hello?
Hello.
Am I in the wrong meeting?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, all right, good. But for some reason, it looks different.
I thought so too. It does look different.
County Council, right?
This is Kim. Can you let me in?
I think we're having some technical difficulties.
Yeah. Hey, Edison. This is Angie. Not sure that this link is correct because it seems to be showing the Board of Commissioners screen. And then all of the council members should be panelists. And let me see here. And I did click the county council work session, so
I see Judge Galvin.
oh, awesome.
Yay! It's his meeting.
I see Christine. I don't see anybody, and I don't have Addison's. Can TSD tell me who's all on this call? Who's I'm in the meeting? I need a name.
I can see that there are 9 panelists. I can see that
Okay.
there are
All right.
attendees, but I can't type in a chat. I'm not able to do
Oh,
it.
oh, so Michelle's trying to get in too. We are having some problems. So, because TSD's not responding to me.
Oh,
Hang on, I'm gonna call Eric.
I did
Okay.
see a note from Michelle saying that she used the Board of Commissioners background.
I saw that. So who said that?
Kim?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
Addison. Hey, Addison. I don't know what's going on, but we need to get everybody, not
Hey.
everybody, but most people promoted to panelists.
Trouble getting into the meeting.
Do what, Kim?
Oh, well, it's like I mean, they're not promoting people.
No, I understand. There seems to be a,
Okay. All right.
it says there's 9 panelists.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye. Addison, this is Angie. I can give you names. Can you hear me? Awesome. I want you to promote Kate Wiltz, Kim Shell, Trent Deckard, Jennifer Crossley. Let's see here, going down. Probably Brianne Gregory, Cheryl Munson, Jeff McKim. Jeff Cockrell will need to be moved there. I suspect. So Lisa Ridge will need to be moved to a panelist. Megan Miller as a panelist. I suspect Troy Hatfield is also a panelist.
Carlos.
Carlos, yeah, I don't know about, I know that Judge Harvey's on here. She should probably be promoted. And that's under Holly Harvey.
Yeah. Lisa Abraham.
Okay,
Linda Brady.
Linda Brady.
Lois Malone.
He's already been moved up.
Okay.
Yeah, but thanks.
Um,
I think that's it. Carlos.
Megan
when we get to
Miller.
this- I'm sorry?
Megan Miller.
Yeah, I said Megan. Megan, Lisa, and Judge Harvey are still needing to be promoted.
And I'm assuming the garden is
yes.
Nichelle.
Yes.
Michelle, yes, we need to promote Michelle. Hey, now it's starting to look a little bit. I can see Kate.
Okay. I believe, I think we're all here. So
Yeah,
in that case, let me call to order the work session of Monroe County Council for February 22nd, 2022. Welcome to everyone. I will call off the counselors' names and please let us know that you are here for the record. Counselor Deckard,
Here.
Counselor McKim,
Here.
Counselor Hawk,
Here.
Counselor Munson,
Here.
Counselor Crossley,
Here.
Counselor Iverson.
Here.
Terrific. We will move to item 2 on our agenda, which is the adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes to make to the agenda or to propose? Ms. Shell.
Yes, I received a phone call from Auditor Smith. Her item is number 11. No, sorry. Apologize. Number 13. She is not going to be able to make the meeting tonight and would ask that you table this to the first meeting of March.
Okay. Do we have to have a motion to table as separate from removing from an agenda or?
Yes, we need a motion because it has to have the date and the time because it has an appropriation attached to it.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Deckard.
I was just going to say, council, I move to table item number 13 on our agenda until our first regular session in March, which is March 8th.
Do I have a
Second.
second? And do we need to vote on any changes independently, or can we, I guess that's because it's a single motion, we need to vote on the motion itself.
Correct.
Could we then do a vote on removing item 13 or tabling it?
Counselor Deckard,
Yes.
Counselor Munson,
Yes.
Counselor McKim,
Yes.
Counselor Crossley,
Yes.
Counselor Iverson,
Yes.
Counselor Wiltz,
Yes.
Counselor Hawk.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
I have another one.
Yes.
I just got a text from Miss Purdy that she would like to remove her item number 6
Okay.
from the agenda at this time.
That will probably also have to be tabled though, since it's an appropriation. Is that correct?
If we could have Miss Purdy for just a moment on here to respond, are you wanting to move forward with this appropriation, or do you want to remove it altogether?
I don't know why I tried to work from home. I want to remove it altogether.
Okay.
At this point, there wouldn't be, I don't have a date that I would ask that you possibly rehear this, so I would just like to remove it in its entirety.
Council, I move we remove item number 6 from the agenda.
Second.
So could we have a roll call vote as long as I'm not seeing anybody jumping up to say anything? So yes.
Not sure you have to vote on that, but maybe you do.
Counselor Wiltz,
Yes.
Counselor Iverson,
Yes.
Counselor Crossley,
Yes.
Counselor Hawk,
Yes.
Counselor McKim,
Yes.
Counselor Munson,
Yes.
Counselor Deckard.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other changes to tonight's agenda?
Council, I move we adopt the agenda as amended.
Second.
Great. Do we need a roll call vote on this?
I believe so, because it's been amended.
Megan, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Counselor Crossley,
Yes.
Counselor McKim,
Yes.
Counselor Munson,
Yes.
Counselor Deckard,
Yes.
Counselor Hawk,
Yes.
Counselor Wiltz,
Yes.
Counselor Iverson.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
We might have set a new record for number of votes in the first few minutes of a meeting. We have our next agenda item is department updates. I don't have anything specific on the agenda, but do we have any departments that would like to make an update at this time? I see Ms. Cottle from the Health Department. Welcome.
Good evening. I will be really quick. I know you have a long agenda tonight. I wanted to really talk a little bit just about some testing information and about vaccines, but also to just let you know that we are continuing to see some positive trends in terms of cases. And so we are pleased to continue to watch that. Our numbers are still high. They are still elevated, but we will drop below 200 cases per 100,000 this week, and I'm very, very thrilled about that. So we've been hoping and waiting to get back down there. So it should be right around 175, 176 tomorrow per 100,000. And again, that's high, but it is lower than it's been, and so we're pleased with that. In terms of testing, the Gravity site has changed its hours. They are now open Monday through Friday. They are open 8 to 4 on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Thursday 10 to 6. They were getting very little business on Saturdays, and so they are open now on Monday and closed on Saturdays. The testing site at Indianapolis Motor Speedway that has been open now for months, this is its last week. It will close on Saturday. And their hours this week, they are open tomorrow and Friday from 8 to 4. They're open Thursday 4 to 8. And then Saturday, their last day will be 8 a.m. to noon. And that is testing and vaccinations. So I wanted to make everybody aware of those two things. And then just to remind people that our public health clinic still provides COVID-19 vaccines, as well as your provider, local pharmacies. And we want everybody to stay up to date on all of their vaccines. And with that, I just want to let people know that we have lots of children who are behind on their vaccines. And tomorrow there is a Back on Track clinic at Ivy Tech. It is from 3 to 7 p.m. and you can get your child's school vaccines. You can get COVID vaccine if you need that. You know, if you need vaccine for sports, they will have a variety of vaccinations available for your children. And they have lots of food and gifts and things, school supplies available as well. So quite an event that we are pleased to be able to have in our community. So wanted to let people know about that. They can go to mdwise.org Back on Track for more information if you want to do that. Registering is preferred, but it is not required. So if nothing else, show up tomorrow afternoon or evening from 3 to 7 to get those needed vaccines. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you. Looks like Mr. Iverson might have a question or comment.
Yeah, Ms. Cottle, don't go too far. Given the news that's come out of Indiana University regarding masking, can you remind the public when the next press conference is and when the next Board of Health meeting are?
You're on mute.
Of course I am. The next press conference is this Friday. It's at 1 o'clock. The next board meeting is at 4:30 a week from Thursday. So it is on the 3rd, I believe that is at 4:30. And the announcement with IU really does fall in line with everything else that's happening and expected, and the new guidelines for institutions of higher education. So, but the opportunity to learn more on Friday if you have, and certainly at the board meeting next week.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Cottle? Well, thank you very much for the updates. Those are all important things to hear about. Okay, are there any other departments who wish to make an update at this time? And seeing none, that brings us to item number 4 on our agenda, which is an update from Nichelle Wash with The Garden, who is facilitating our countywide employee training project. And we also have Angie Purdy, the Commissioner's Administrator. So welcome to you both, and take it away.
Thank you, Council. And I'm just popped on here just to introduce Nichelle and to say that I think you're going to find her presentation informative and positive. And that we, and I'm speaking as an employee, really appreciated the training. And so I want to hand this over to her and let her give you the update and leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Angie. And is it appropriate for me to share my screen at this time, Council? Okay, great. Well, first of all, it's good to see all of you again. It's been some time since our training. So I want to thank all of the council members who participated. Thank you for such a in-depth and really introspective training opportunity with you all. I am going to be in your way for a few minutes today because I do want to get through the report that was shared and answer any questions that you all may have. And then I'll also provide an update that's not included in this report. So a project recap, so far we've trained 162 staff, and they've gone through 5 sessions, and there were 7 unique training groups. So this is really exciting for us to get through this many staff. Each of those staff have completed at least a minimum of 3 trainings. We have some staff that, due to scheduling changes, hiring, firing, all the things, right? Also the pandemic, have not been able to complete all 5, but 162 staff have completed at least 3 sessions. In total, we've delivered about 135 hours of training. So if you do the math, that's about 54 unique different training sessions that we have delivered. We offered the Intercultural Development Inventory, which is a 50-question assessment that gauges your level of intercultural competence. And it also came with an individual report, a development report. And so 62% of your staff that have taken the training have completed the IDI, which is a pretty good return rate on something like this. I'm not going to read through these because counselors, you all have gone through these sessions. I know we have one more to complete together, so I'm not going to read through these, but for anyone who's curious, here are the descriptions for the 5 sessions that were attended. And in addition to the virtual sessions that they participated in, they also were engaged in online discussions, which I would say was one of the places where we saw some of the most powerful transformations and enlightening moments. So we had 17 different discussion questions, over 57 participants active in each of the prompts. at any given time. On average, staff were spending about 40 minutes per resource, and we did accumulate just under 1,000 total comments. So people were really engaged. The most common comment we got to see in Perusall was, wow, I didn't realize this. Okay, so there's a lot of learning that was happening. Some common themes that we saw in discussion, and even in some of our virtual trainings, we saw people go from resistance to these concepts, then into acceptance after not only learning or engaging with the material, but getting a chance to talk to their colleagues about their lived experiences and finding out that some of these experiences in the workplace and in our personal lives differed from our own. We got to see a nice shift from this I don't see color mindset to affirming that I can acknowledge color and I can acknowledge and see how changing the race of people can actually change their experiences in the world that we live in. So that was good. And also in their workplace. We saw people asking questions and receiving many helpful answers, not just from us, but from colleagues. So we had a chance to present this proposal to the Board of Commissioners, but we've also had some chances to just connect with staff one-on-one, and their ability to keep these conversations going in the workplace, to start adopting this language, being able to hold each other accountable. Hey, that was a microaggressive behavior, or that was a microaggression. We've been able to see that and hear that. And I've also gotten those updates from HR that this language is happening in the workplace and some conflicts are being able to be resolved by using what people have learned in the training. And then a lot of this is self-interrogation, right? Because when we started working with Monroe County staff, we learned very quickly that not everyone was ready to talk about systemic stuff. So we had to spend time doing some self-interrogation. By the end of it, though, unanimously felt confident that people started to understand how systemic biases, the water that we swim in, affects people at the individual level, but also understanding more broadly what are the systems that are at play that disrupt equity and inclusion in the workplace. There was a time during this session where we had some staff, just to be frank, that were pretty pissed off with me because session 2 was hard. It is a challenging session. You all went through it as well. But what we got to see was people go from hostility to advocacy. So I want to share really quickly, this was probably one of the most powerful transformations in the entire experience, because when this started, this person was like, I don't have time for this. You're asking for 2.5, 3 hours to commit to this. I don't want to have these conversations. I'm afraid of what type of tension could be built in the workplace. And they saw themselves as a really accepting person. But when we started off, and these are direct quotes from this person I won't name, but they started off like, so I'm automatically racist just because I'm white? This is so insulting. Not everything is about race, and calling white people white supremacists is obscene. Which, if you've done a session in the garden, you know that I never call anyone any ist or ism, right? But if you self-interrogate and land there, and that's the own work that you have to live. But this was session 1, just doing some basic defining language. Halfway through, we start to see in the Perusall, this person then went to, I had a similar reaction when I learned about this for the first time, I think, or this is someone's response to that. I think this is more about how being white is seen as default because of Jim Crow and segregation. Racism separates us from each other and from ourselves as white people. So this was a colleague's response to the previous comment. Later, think around session 4, which was anti-racist praxis, we start to see this person engage more deeply. So back to person 1, they were able to say, I've never heard of Jim Crow laws before. That's horrible. I was honestly shocked to hear, middle-aged adult, not having heard of Jim Crow law, but we talked about what's in education, what's not in our education. This person said, I wish I learned about this in school. Can you recommend any books about this? I'm realizing that we all want society to just let us be people, whether we're white or black, rich or poor. So I want to start educating myself by reading more about this. And this is what we wanted. We wanted people to get to the place where they would figure out what is it that I need to do to advance the culture and the inclusion in the workplace. After every session, we did an evaluation, and I won't go through every single one of these, but to give you an idea of the type of questions that we asked them about their comfort. We asked them if they were learning something. There's no session in which less than 85% of people have said that they learned something, or 84% of people. Everyone was saying that they learned. Now, I will say, obviously, as you go through 5 sessions, the number of participants kind of, dwindles, okay? But for the most part, consistent with what we've been seeing. The fact that people were saying that they learned something, even if they felt the session was hard, that was a win for Monroe County. When we asked about level of comfort, we wanted to see an increase. Whether it was a little or a lot didn't really matter, but we wanted to see people's comfort addressing whatever that particular topic was. We wanted to see it increase. So for session 1, you'll see the numbers here. Maybe it's kind of small, so I'll enlarge this a bit for you. I see some people squinting like, what are these numbers? Here you go. So after completing session around acknowledging our own biases, just under 86 or just over 86% of people were saying that it has increased. So the people are getting comfortable acknowledging where their biases exist. And we know sometimes that's one of the hardest feats. We did do participant feedback for each of the sessions. So again, you all have this report. I won't take too much time here reading this, but I do want to pull out some of the qualitative responses that we were able to get. Many people had these moments where they started realizing the difference between acknowledging bias and feeling safe. And it's the language and how we say things. So they started thinking about how our policies written, how do we communicate standards of professionalism in our workplace? How do we talk about culture? A lot of people surprisingly were impacted by understanding the difference between equality and equity, and how the goal is to really remove barriers where possible. So again, these are actual responses taken from the evaluations after each session. In the report, we go through each of these over and over. So I'm not going to do this for all 5 sessions, but if you have any questions about anything that was included, please feel free to let me know. So I mentioned earlier the IDI, Intercultural Development Inventory. It gives you 2 scores. So we did this on 2 levels. We administered it to individuals, and then we also did an organizational assessment based on the individual's data. Most people in our organization thought we were right in that acceptance spot. We were so accepting of differences, and we're pretty good at adapting our mindsets and our behaviors across cultural groups, but the developmental orientation, or as what we sometimes say, the actual orientation, was right at minimization. This is what we expected, okay? Minimization is not a terrible thing, but because there was greater than a 7-point gap between the perceived orientation and developmental orientation, we did know that this was a significant difference in how we see ourselves versus how cultural groups from our own see us, or how we're handling intercultural competency. So what does minimization mean? As a staff, based on the group of staff that we've trained, which we know that there are more staff to Monroe County, so I want to make sure that I put that out there. This could change the more people that we assess, okay? But based on the group that we've been able to work with, we're in minimization, meaning we recognize the essential humanity of every person, and we try our best to act in ways that are tolerant. We're not quite accepting of people. We don't quite embrace the differences. We're interested in the differences, but we have a limited ability to adapt to other cultural practices. So we kind of struggle a little bit with change. We don't necessarily like to highlight differences. We would rather promote the similarities that we have. And oftentimes that can create a culture of you go along to get along. I'll never forget one of the first sessions that I did with staff as a whole. One of the people said, Monroe County government feels like family, like you should love working here. And they ended that comment with, and if you don't, then you shouldn't be here. And so we got to have some conversations about, well, let's talk about the differences in families and what does it mean to be a part of family, and how that may not necessarily be the same lived, like family, biological family, may not be a good experience for some, and how those types of comments can make people feel excluded or create a negative environment. So we walked through the IDI with them. We did a debrief and some optional sessions. They were well attended. We did 2 debriefs, and that was an amazing experience. One update that I will have that's not included in the report, we have a department that has some technical difficulties because we were managing this via Zoom. So we now have a plan in place to get this department trained through all 5 of their sessions in person. So those sessions are coming up fairly soon. And then we have another group of staff, whether they were like new hires or transitioned, or perhaps are just so understaffed that they couldn't commit to the 5 sessions. They'll be going through their 5 training sessions virtually after our in-person group. So we're looking to wrap all of the trainings up, I think, at least by the end of this summer, and you all will have the final report, and that is consistent with the 2-year plan, the 2-year outline that we had set forth when we started this. I want to remind us all that this was a subset of staff that we've trained. There's a whole another group that we did not include in this because we were trying to make it manageable to get through for this first year. So just so you all know, not every single staff member has had this training, but it is available should you all be interested. That concludes my formal presentation. Do any of you wonderful people have questions for me?
Counselor Iverson.
Yeah, let me kick things off. Thank you so much for being here tonight and presenting all this wonderful data and for doing all these trainings. Really appreciate it. I especially enjoyed the quantitative data around the IDI. And I was, wondering, it seems like a really great data set to assess at the very beginning. Are you going to be doing another assessment in a little bit? And can you talk about kind of what those next steps look like?
That's a great question. So frankly, I'm happy to do the IDI for your organization later, but that will need to be a new contracted proposal or contract, I should say, with the garden, because it takes on average about 6 to 9 months to move into another orientation. And one way that we monitor and kind of coach people through advancing their intercultural competence is by working with them on their intercultural development plan. That is a whole nother set of work that we did not include in this contract, but we're absolutely excited to do that. We've seen that work well with many of our clients. I would say if you're going to redo it for this organization, and knowing how we are short-staffed in that capacity in many ways during this pandemic, I would say wait about a year. Rather than trying to do it at the 6-month mark, I will wait about a year from now to give people a chance to really do that work. But yes, we're happy to do it. We don't have plans to do it yet because there's no contract in place.
Thank you.
Ms. Crossley, you had your hand up, or?
I did. And then Counselor Iverson literally just took the question out. But yes, I wanted to say that was a great presentation from Mrs. Walsh, because I think it's definitely important for us on many fronts and different department heads to take this, because that's how we are operating. And it's very uncomfortable to get uncomfortable, but once you do it, I'm sure, hopefully, that people have learned from it. So it's amazing that this has happened. And I know I'm coming in at the tail end of it. So I think there's one more session that I would be able to take, and I'm excited to take that. But yeah, I think that was my question is, like, after this has been all said and done, is there some type of quarterly or monthly or year check-in for people? Because yes, now that you've done the work, let's put the work into action, because as different department heads are going along with this too, I think it's also important for us to worry about how we are interacting with the public and our constituencies as well. So that was my little comment, but Counselor Iverson took the question, so.
And can I respond to that really quickly? Is that appropriate? I'm
Please.
glad that you all are talking about continuous support and learning, because one thing that we did throughout this, in addition to the training and administering the IDIs, that I met fairly, I would say, consistently with Elizabeth Sensenstein to just check in at the HR level. What are the needs? Are there any challenges? Are there any things that we need to work through? But aside from that, there were a number of one-on-one meetings that I had with your staff, whether that was virtual or even grabbing coffee at Soma or grabbing lunch at Buffalo's, to talk about situations that had happened and how to use what they have learned in the garden to address the situations. There's one particular group that I can think of. They had some interpersonal issues after they realized, like, okay, here we have differing opinions. We didn't know this about each other. Now we're talking in these trainings and we've learned this about each other. So how do we restore harmony in the workplace? We worked with that team to help them build a plan, and we've heard good things so far. So in addition to the virtual trainings, we also made ourselves accessible to meet with your staff one-on-one or in small groups. And we continuously checked in with HR to see how people are moving through the process. So I absolutely support what Mrs. Crossley is saying about needing that continuous support throughout time, because we've seen that it has helped this group.
And that was my question. So we're just like stealing each other's questions as we go along, because we have you through the end of this year in terms of the contract. Okay. So, yeah, I would be very interested in, I know you've got a lot left to do because the summer's here before you know it. But I am interested in kind of what the next steps could be, and how we build on what we've learned, because I know from the sessions that I participated in, I'm still processing, and so, it can only be value added if we continue to work on this. Are there any other questions for Ms. Wash? No, we've got a long meeting ahead of us, so I will let you go. Thank you for being here and taking the time to give us the update. And most of us will see you in a couple weeks. Thank you. All right. Our next item, we're at agenda item number 5, the SLFRP requests.
Council, I move to approve the Board of Commissioners' request for an additional appropriation in Fund 8950-0000 American Rescue Plan Act Fund in the amount of $1,200,000 in the services category for the Heading Home Housing First project.
Second.
Great. So this is something I think we've all talked about multiple times. Angie, are you gonna represent? There's Julie Thomas is here. Yay.
Julie's here. Mary Morgan is here. I don't know if Efrat has been able to make it. If you have any questions about them, we don't have the MOU in place yet. I know that legal is working with Bree in the auditor's office to make sure that we have all of our items that we need to have clearly identified in the MOU for everyone. And so this is something that you guys have agreed on before, and we're just currently asking for the appropriation, and we will not disperse any monies until the MOU is in place.
Great. Do we have any questions from council for our guests here? Yeah. Oh, okay. Mr. Iverson.
I was hoping to invite Ms. Morgan to give maybe an update on how work is going and kind of an update on, we're in the middle of winter. We know it's always a struggle. So what's going on?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Greetings to you all, and Efrat Pfefferman of the United Way sends her regrets. She had another commitment tonight and couldn't make it, but we're looking forward to coming back and speaking to you and the commissioners on a regular basis. So hopefully we can plan something a little more formal. I'm really here to, first of all, thank you, and thank you for your leadership and up to the process so far. We are moving along. I am hiring an assistant director working on branding and website. I think the most exciting thing to date is the possibility of joining the Built for Zero organization, which we had talked about in the working group for Heading Home. Our advisory group is meeting on Friday with a representative of Built for Zero, and I've been in discussions with them. We expect that we will join and that they will invite us to join. And if that happens, we would be the first community in Indiana to be part of their Built for Zero network, which consists of over 100 communities nationwide. So that's really exciting. As you know, there's a lot of work to do in a variety of ways and issues, from transportation, healthcare, childcare, and of course, adding housing stock and adding accessibility to the existing units by building relationships with landlords. So again, I just really appreciate your support and leadership on this, and happy to talk with any of you anytime and come back formally at some future meeting.
Thanks. Jeff McKim.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to ask for an update as well.
Okay.
Asked and answered.
As was I. So we're all just, asking the same questions. Councillor Hawk, do you have a question?
Yes. Do we know, is this going to be something we know in advance, what type of housing that we are going to be concentrating on? Is it going to be a certain percent used for perhaps lower income housing and others for, different stacks, different kinds of housing available? I'd like to think that we'd be concentrating on rewarding those folks who are going to work and help them get into housing. I worked with low-income housing for years and years and years, and to me, it was always a blessing to have those rules that we had to follow that said, yes, they had to have employment and they had to show ability to make a payment, and then they could have perhaps getting in a house with no down payment and maybe lower interest rates. And so I would like to see something similar to that, but when are we going to find out what is on the agenda for that?
Well, I hope that you've read the Heading Home plan, and if you haven't, I'd be happy to forward that to you. And part of it, honestly, we're still figuring out. I think we definitely, as a community, need some permanent supportive housing, that is housing that includes support services for people with substance abuse and mental health issues. But we need, I would say, honestly, across the board, we need all types of housing. So we need the kind that you described. We need permanent supportive housing. This is not going to be, a one and done project. So I'm not sure I'm answering your question as well as you would like me to, but again, I would be happy to come back and give a formal presentation at some point in the future.
Right. I guess I come down on, and this should be no surprise to anyone, I've made it pretty clear that I think that many times we offer so many services to so many different groups of people that these folks are joining and living here or moving here to Monroe County for our services. And so it really is of a concern to me that we would grow those services thinking we're going to be helping the people who are already here, when, as Commander Crow said the other day, hey, that's a two-edged sword. So I just wanted to share those concerns, because I think the people of this community need to know that we are looking out for what their needs are as well. And there's a lot of people out there over and over again are saying, look, we've looked every place for affordable rents. They cannot afford to pay rent, and they're working full-time jobs and still can't afford to pay the rents because rent's so high. So I don't know how all that's going to come together. I'm looking forward to hearing how it is, but I hope we don't concentrate on just housing for those folks who don't have a job, who, the Housing First model that I watched and looked at at the state level, how the funding comes through, it made it clear that they did not have to be sober and they did not have to have a job. And that's not, I'm hoping that's not the direction we're going. And I see
I'm
Angie
gonna-
going, no.
Yeah, I'm going to hop in here and kind of help Mary out a little bit. But with the Housing First initiative, what you will find is that when people are secure in a home, then they're in a better position to actually address their other issues that they're trying to deal with. And we have for years focused on let's get this person clean. Let's get this person even a job, get them off of substances. And the truth of the matter, and it's been proven, I don't have the reference for you right now, but I know Mary probably can get it for you for sure. Emily Pike can with Hope House, that it's been shown that when you give somebody a secure place to stay, then they can then start to work on their other issues, and they're much more likely to be successful. So it does seem a little bit counterintuitive to those of us who have kind of been raised with the old concept of you have to be clean and sober, and you know before you can have a home or before you can get a job, and that's just not really there. It's been proven that that's not helping anybody, and people are not being successful when they are approached in that manner.
I would also add, Commissioner or Counselor Hawk, related to your concern about other people coming here for services. One of the challenges that we're going to address is reaching out to other communities, other surrounding counties, and working with people in those areas, especially landlords, so that when somebody comes here for services, when they get a home, that home can be back where they have a support network of friends and family. So if they're coming up from Lawrence County, they live in Bedford, they can get services here, but then ultimately find housing back in their community where they have that support.
Thank you. There's a lot that the Housing Insecurity Working Group worked on, learned. I was involved. I learned so much about these concepts, and I'm just really excited to have our community start digging into some evidence-based approaches to housing and combating homelessness. So I'm excited about the Built for Zero program, and I hope you'll let us know how that works out. Are there any other questions for Ms. Morgan or about the appropriation? I think we're all excited to get that accomplished. Okay. Then is there any public comment? I didn't forget. Okay, seeing no public comment, could we please have a roll call vote on the appropriation?
Counselor Munson,
Yes.
Counselor McKim,
Yes.
Counselor Deckard,
Yes.
Counselor Hawk,
No.
Counselor Crossley,
Yes.
Counselor Iverson,
Yes.
Counselor Wiltz.
Yes.
Motion passed majority 6-1.
Thank you, counselors.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, we are now moving to, I believe, 5B on the agenda.
Council, I move to approve the Board of Commissioners' request for an additional appropriation in Fund 8950-0000 American Rescue Plan Act Fund in the amount of $400,000 in the services category for the Highway Brine System Project.
Second.
Fantastic. So this is a commissioner's request, but I see Lisa Ridge from Highway Department is with us as well. Did you want to introduce the topic?
I'm a little, this is under a services line. Should it be a services line? Or should this been a 400, more of a capital purchase line? I just noticed that, sorry.
Well, that's a good question.
I think in my mind, it should be because we're building a capital. I mean, we're going to end up with a building and not service. So I think it should be a 40s one.
Okay, so the way I took it when we were doing this and working through it was that you were going to be contracting out for this to be built. So that's why it was under contractual or under services. That we, the county, was not going to be building it, that you would probably be having somebody else come in and do it.
Well, I think that is true, that is how it would work, but we go through the bidding process for capital items. And so I think it would have to be a capital line.
Well, I was gonna say, at this point, you can approve it as a, because that's the way we advertised it, as services, and make a category transfer
Request. Yeah.
To move it to capital.
Is there an urgency on the timeline for this?
That I will defer to Miss Ridge, and I think the answer will be yes, but I'll let her answer that for you.
And there's definitely different components to the whole brine system. So part of that is a contractual to build the building, which I believe we had to award that part with the money that we had in our account at the time, because there was a timeline. I think it was only, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, it was like the bid was only good for 2 weeks when the bids were opened. So that had been, we had the money to cover that, but then we have different components to build the whole system, the tanks, different things that go into the trucks, utility relocations, things like that. But yeah, it is on a timeline. I believe Jeff and Michael Chambly, our architect, gave the actual February 9th as the starting date for the timeline for the building. And I think it has to be done within 60 to 90 days.
Okay.
Weather depending, of course.
Right. Councilor McKim, you have a question?
Well, I would just like to say, I would very much like to move forward with this. So if it's okay with the lawyers for us to simply approve it as is and then immediately move and vote on a category transfer, I'm happy to make that motion afterwards, but I would certainly like to, given the timeline on this project, I'd very much like to move forward tonight and not move it to another meeting.
Okay. Councilor Munson? You're on.
Thank you. I think since we're discussing this tonight, probably that we should have a more full explanation of why the brine facility and how it facilitates use of our roads and public safety.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So we had looked into brine systems in the past. It's, as you can see, is a very expensive system to be built. When we accepted the transfer of roads back to Monroe County's jurisdiction after I-69 was built, we met with NDOT to discuss the bridge overpasses that don't have access to I-69, such as Kinzer Pike, Rockport Road. When those bridges cross over the interstate, they're actually the jurisdiction of NDOT's and not Monroe County's. However, we would be crossing over I-69 to get from one side to the other for county jurisdiction. So NDOT offered to give Monroe County $285,000 for the startup of a brine system for us to keep our plows down, put brine down on those bridge overpasses. I believe there's 6 of them. During the snow season. So this was a step, basically half the cost of setting up a brine system was paid for by NDOT through a mutual agreement. Using the brine system, it's basically a saltwater mixture. If you go out a couple days before a storm is to hit, and then you put the brine down. This helps with overtime cost. It helps with the less ice impact on the roadways. And we hope to expand this system in the long run. It saves from putting down so much sand on the roadways and then actually having to do cleanup with the sand in certain areas. So it's a definite benefit. It's a definite eventual cost savings. But again, but as you can see, the expense of it was it's a huge expense upfront, but it pays for itself in the long run. We visited probably 3 or 4 different brine systems around. We went to NDOT, we went to City of Bloomington, we went to Harrison County. So we wanted to build a system that would last Monroe County and then also give us room to expand. I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you very much.
So
Councillor Hawk?
Yes, I really believe that having the ability to be able to have the brine system will literally save lives. Because if you can do that up front, it depends on what happens with the weather, but this is going to make a huge, huge difference. And in addition to which, hopefully it will not be as much buildup in that we have to work with all the ditches and so forth that get filled up with because you won't have to be using sand perhaps as much. Is that correct? So that saves some money on the storm water, cleaning the ditches and so forth. And
Yeah.
I think, and I want to just add that I think Councilmember McKim is correct. And if we just vote on what has been advertised, as soon as we get that vote done, then we have the ability to move from one category to the next, very same meeting, and move it to wherever you need it.
Councillor Iverson?
I had a question about bridges covered under this appropriation. In the packet, it indicates that it's just the bridges over I-69. And is there a plan to expand that to other bridges in the county, or is that just something that's in this contract?
No, absolutely. It will be expanded to our busier locations. It'll be our bridges. We have 157 bridge locations. The only reason why I stressed out the 6 was because that was part of the agreement on why we received the $285,000.
Great. Yeah. There's some really slippery bridges out on the east side of the county. So
yeah, no, we'll actually, and then again, that's where we can try and expand and put tanks and more trucks eventually once we can, get going. But it will definitely go throughout the county.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for all you do.
Thank you.
Councillor Munson, is your hand still up from before or is it new? Okay. Michelle?
I just want to provide a capital account line. So for that second motion. So I just want some clarification. I believe that we could use, it's called in the capital line, it's called just buildings. Would legal, Jeff Cockle, do you feel like that's a good enough description? I don't know. I'm not sure what we're actually doing with
I
it.
think that would be fine. I think we are doing a building. I think that would be adequate.
Can I just hop in there? Sorry. Since we are using a particular fund that is specific to these funds, the SLURF, the old ARPA funds, could we not actually create a line number that says exactly what we're doing? I think that would be the best way to do all of these expenditures, distributions of dollars from these funds. So if we could name it brine system, that would be ideal. That way it's clear to everybody
Okay.
what we spent it on.
All right, just give me a second.
Well, I don't know if anybody else here, I mean, council, if they agree with that
Well, no, I think that makes a lot of sense if we're keeping this, if this is coming from the ARPA funds. My question was going to be, is that really where we want this to come from? Because I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I think it's completely compatible with the purposes outlined for expenditures. I'm just wondering if we want to set a precedent of paying for different departments' requests out of ARPA. And I just kind of throw that question out for consideration. And Mr. McKim.
So I actually had a different comment before, but to address that particular comment, I think absolutely. I mean, this is, infrastructure is one of the 4 main categories of ARPA. So this isn't just, I don't think you can really fairly reduce this to just paying for different departments' requests. This is one of the purposes for which the SLRF or ARPA money was allocated. And I think this is also a request that has clear and demonstrable countywide benefit. I mean, you talk about one thing we can all, pretty much everybody, you ask anybody, no matter what their government philosophy is, what they think an appropriate activity of local government is, it's, wow, keeping the roads plowed and clear during snowstorms. So I think this is a really good use of, personally, of it. And if not, then what fund would we use? So I definitely think it is entirely appropriate for SLRF. The other comment I was just going to make is the other thing about using less sand, by the way, for people who ride their bikes in the community, sand is terrible. It is dangerous and people slip all the time. I have fallen and slipped on sand. The less sand we can use, the better. I think this makes a really nice substitute for sand that'll make things safer for bicyclists out in the county as well.
Are there any other questions or comments from council? Is there any? Oh, Ms. Shell.
I have a number ready. It would be account line 48000 brine system. And it would need to be created for that fund, since that's brand new to that fund.
Great, thank you. Do we have any public comment on this topic? Okay, seeing none, we will have a roll call vote on this issue.
Counselor Hawk,
Yes.
Counselor Deckard,
Yes.
Counselor Iverson,
Yes.
Counselor Wiltz,
Yes.
Counselor McKim,
Yes.
Counselor Munson,
Yes.
Counselor Crossley.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Council, I move we create in Fund American Rescue Plan Act Fund 8950-0000, new account line 48000 brine system, and simultaneously transfer $400,000 in appropriations from the services category to the capital category.
Second.
Second.
Fantastic. Is there any comment on this motion? Any public comment? Roll call vote, please.
Counselor Crossley,
Yes.
Counselor Munson,
Yes.
Counselor McKim,
Yes.
Counselor Wiltz,
Yes.
Counselor Iverson,
Yes.
Counselor Deckard,
Yes.
Counselor Hawk.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is number 7. We're skipping number 6 on the amended agenda, and it's the legal department.
Council, I move to open for discussion the proposed 2022 agreement with Financial Solutions Group FSG for sustainability analysis, revenue and spending plan and capital improvement plan for Monroe County.
Second.
Is this something that, oh, there you are, Mr. Cockrell's here to tell us about?
Yeah, if you recall last fall, we went through the initial round of having Financial Solutions Group put together a sustainability plan. You guys should have all received a copy of that plan. I know that there are some additional items such as policies that we're going to need to look at for fund balances and things like that. This is kind of a touch base with the council. There's value in continuing relationship for these kind of for this program. I guess from my perspective, as one of the members of the county, as I represent the auditor's office as well, when we go through bond and the bond rating process, they're getting a lot more intense with their questions, and a lot of those questions are answered by this report, as well as some of those policies that we're going to be working on. So I certainly would recommend continuing this process, but we've always felt that a lot of the value of this contract was to the council. So we wanted to get your input and feedback on whether you think it's worth continuing.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Cockrell on this item? Councilor McKim.
Not so much a question, only that I strongly support moving forward with continuing this contract. I think it's clear that this kind of analysis is going to be important for our ability to bond. It's been recommended to us that we start thinking about 3-year or 3+ year budgeting. I think we're going to need the kind of technical and analytical support to be able to do that. I think that'll put the county on firmer footing, especially as depending on what happens with annexation, if we see reductions in revenue, I think we can really benefit from having that this additional analysis.
Councilor Iverson.
I completely agree. I think this is very, very valuable, not only for that 3-year analysis that Councilor McKim was just mentioning, but God forbid there be another downturn in the economy where we just don't know what's happening with certain economic indicators. This is very valuable to be able to reference and to try and prepare for what's coming down the pike. And the last thing I'll mention that I find valuable is the benchmarking with other communities. I think that's really helpful to look at, to kind of know like where we sit with other communities that are similar. So yeah, I would definitely want to continue this.
Other comments? Questions? No? Okay, I too think that this is really important and can augment kind of the information that we have to make our decisions. So is there any public comment? Seeing none, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Wiltz,
Yes.
Counselor Munson,
Yes.
Counselor Hawk,
Yes.
Counselor Iverson,
Yes.
Counselor McKim,
Yes.
Counselor Crossley,
Yes.
Counselor Deckard.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. To be clear, did we, Trent, just for me to check, did you read in the amount with your motion?
No, that is my next motion, if we're all good.
Okay, all right, so go ahead then with the amount.
Council, I move to forward to the Board of Commissioners the 2022 FSG agreement with a scope of services not to exceed a total of $28,000 with a positive recommendation.
Second.
Okay, I think we've talked this one through.
Call question.
Right. So let's go ahead. Is there public comment? Checking none. Please call a roll call again. Thank you.
Counselor Deckard,
Yes.
Counselor Crossley,
Yes.
Counselor McKim,
Yes.
Counselor Iverson,
Yes.
Counselor Hawk,
Yes.
Counselor Munson,
Yes.
Counselor Wiltz.
Yes,
Motion passed unanimously.
great. Thank you. We will now move on to number 8 on our agenda.
Council, I move to approve the court's request for an additional appropriation in Fund 91130000 Family Court Project in the amount of $19,406 in the services category.
Second.
Great. This looks like it's coming from courts. So do we have someone to tell us? Oh, Lisa Abraham, you are on the panel. Would you like to speak to this issue? I am not hearing anything.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
I'm here before you tonight requesting, luckily we were gracious enough to receive another family court grant, another year. This year we received $19,406 and it goes towards our counsel in the court pro bono program, which provides free legal assistance to anyone who is needing it. They are continuing to do it by Zoom now since they're not coming into the Justice Building, but they are still holding it. So I'm before you tonight asking you to appropriate the grant so we can start paying out the invoices.
Makes perfect sense to me. Are there any comments or questions from council? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, let's go ahead and have a roll call vote.
Counselor Wiltz,
Yes.
Counselor Hawk,
Yes.
Counselor Deckard,
Yes.
Counselor Crossley,
Yes.
Counselor Munson,
Yes.
Counselor McKim,
Yes.
Counselor Iverson.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have number 9, which is the Monroe Circuit Court Probation Office and Youth Services Bureau making a presentation to council regarding gaps identified in our youth services program, which is involved in the juvenile justice system, as well as then the need for YSB staffing needs to close those gaps. So I'd like to welcome Judge Galvin, Linda Brady, Chief of Probation Officer, and Vicki Thavanel, YSB Director, as well as Louis Malone. And I think that's everybody. But who would like to begin?
I'll start if that's okay.
Great.
I'm Judge Steve Galvin. Last month when I came before you to talk a little bit about fees, I mentioned that we had a plan that we've been working on for actually a number of years now to expand some juvenile services, and as talked about, to fill some gaps. Tonight we wanted to give you that plan. I note that this started out, probably would have had this to you more than 2 years ago if it wasn't for COVID. Just like many things, COVID had derailed what we had in mind. But since then, we've worked with the Center for Children's Law and Policy in formulating some of this. And I note that we've got a slide presentation for you tonight. It will be, Linda's going to do this. I'm available here tonight, but I felt like that in presenting this to the council, it ought to come from the people who've worked so hard to put it together. As a judge, I have a tendency to say, hey, here's my idea. You know, you all, can you make this a reality? When I have staff like I've got, they just grab things and go, and they've been fantastic with this. So I want to give them a chance to make that presentation. Linda, if we can get your slide presentation up.
The TSD has the slideshow if you want to start it up. Looks like they've ready to start. Okay. All right. Well, the Juvenile Services Plan, that's what we're calling this. And go ahead and move to the next slide, please. I wanted to introduce, we do have a collaboration team that's been working on this, and led by Judge Galvin and Judge Dekoff, our presiding judge, myself, Youth Services Bureau Executive Director Vicki Tevenall, Youth Services Bureau Deputy Director Lewis Malone, Deputy Chief Probation Officer Troy Hatfield, who's also on tonight, Juvenile Probation Director Jeff Hartman, and our JDAI Coordinator, which is Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, Christine McAfee. So we have our whole team here, and new to our team is Judge Harvey, Judge Holly Harvey. She's also on with us tonight. Next slide, please. As Judge Galvin mentioned, we also recently started collaborating with the Center for Children's Law and Policy, or we call them CCLP, because we love acronyms. CCLP comes to us with expertise in promoting racial justice, ending dangerous conditions of confinement, and reducing youth incarceration. We also partnered with Laura Furr, who is a national expert on youth engagement. And we got a grant, thanks to Christine McAfee's excellent grant writing, to engage youth and families who have been involved previously with the youth juvenile justice system to come in as shared partners in decision-making about decisions affecting them. And we did have some local youth and families who met with Laura Furr and had some input as well. Next slide, please. Just give you a little bit of a timeline. Judge Galvin said we've been planning for a long time. So for maybe some people might think, oh, this came out of nowhere. Well, actually for us, we've been in this process for quite some time. 2019, Youth Services Bureau started their construction project. And as Vicki worked with contractors, made sure that there was plenty of space for programming, plenty of space to deliver services, and for additional staff into the future. COVID 2020 derailed us a little bit, but the construction of Youth Services Bureau continued and was completed in the spring of 2020. Then in 2021, because of the state JDAI project being involved with CCLP, Center for Children's Law and Policy, we became involved with them to help us with even more expertise at the table. In November of 2021, CCLP issued a final report, which I sent to the county council, and it's also on the probation department website. And I noticed that you included that in your packet. And in that report, there were 8 recommendations, which we'll get to in a minute. So after we got the CCLP's final report, we finalized our plans, and basically with an increase of front-end diversion with an eye on away from juvenile justice and CHINs. So prevention, front-end diversion. Next slide, please. Beautiful Youth Services Bureau here. So wanted you to get to see how it looks. And with this new construction, there's space for additional staff and additional programming. And with that, next slide, I'm going to turn over to Christine McAfee.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us. I'm not going to read these to you, but I want to kind of expand a little bit on what their focus and intent was. Obviously, if you have specific questions, I'm happy to help with that, as are the rest of our panelists, but just kind of provide a quick, what I consider to be the not fancy pants words version. So number one, really what these recommendations are kind of framed around is to ensure that as we move forward with our youth system reform efforts, that we continue to partner with traditional and non-traditional community members and stakeholders, that we remember to include those impacted populations as we have conversations about what solutions or resources are necessary, that we explore ways to keep young people and families out of the youth justice system. So trying to create processes that don't require a referral to probation to access things. And finally, all of this would not be appropriate if we didn't emphasize the fact that we are keeping an eye on community safety throughout this entire process. So number one, I've heard it used before in different forums, and I think number one really comes down to the idea of nothing about us without us. So making sure that we keep kids and families at the center of all of our reform efforts. Number two, a lot of the work with JDAI is about institutionalization of practices. We've all probably been in situations where there is a change in administration, there is a change in some sort of agency leadership, and practices that aren't kind of formalized in writing can go by the wayside fairly easily. So number two really is to kind of codify and identify what are the criteria for young people and families to be eligible for the diversion. Also to expand on the number of diversion opportunities that young people can participate in. Again, we don't have any written criteria that limits that, but we have kind of a business practice, and CCLP strongly recommends that we look at that and expand it. Sometimes kids need 1 or 2 bites at the same apple before they really get whatever it is that we're trying to impart upon them. Number three, currently an informal adjustment is a probation involved service, but it is less formal than going into court. But what this talks about, again, is ensuring that we're only using court intervention or the coercion of the court in instances when referring young people to community-based resources is not appropriate. So preventing us from having to use the coercion of the court to access resources, primarily, frankly, because of funding opportunities. Number four, expand on what can be considered for a diversion. This really, again, is speaking to the opportunity for our non-traditional stakeholders and community members to help us be creative and think of ways, what are resources that are available in the community that maybe we don't think of. I'm thinking of ideas such as the Warehouse, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Mother Hubbard's Cupboard, Boys and Girls Club, all of those really strong community entities that provide such tremendous pro-social involvement and support to our young people, but aren't typically on probation's kind of short list of referral or diversion opportunities. Number five, currently, as I've mentioned a few times, young people are diverted from the probation system pretty regularly. I think we're experts in knowing what resources are available to the community, and if that need matches with a family, we're great at making that connection. What this does is really encourages our community to become those referral agents, kind of those brokers, so that when someone comes in contact, be it a school person, a business owner, a law enforcement officer, that there's kind of this menu of community resources that are available to meet the needs that have been identified without, again, forcing those young people to touch the youth justice system. Number six is restorative justice practices. We are fortunate in Monroe County to have CJAM, Citizens for Justice. Well, I knew I was going to mess that up. Center for Justice and Mediation. And they do a great job. But what CCLP really encourages us to do is do an assessment on what's working well in that agency, but also what additional supports could be provided. Restorative justice practices are being used all over Indiana, the United States, the nation, or I'm sorry, in the world, for really dealing with situations where there was a harm done, and youth system, justice system involvement is not the solution. Restorative justice practices are just really exploding, and we're really encouraged to work well with our CJAM partners and see what else we can do. Number 7 will be, sorry, I've also got this on my computer screen, so I'm trying to multitask and manage here. So consider a diversion model that uses case management as opposed to traditional supervision. Low-level misdemeanors can come to our department, and frankly, sometimes when people come to us, we can make it hard to get out. We have expectations, we have rules, we have protocols, we have practices that if we set the bar too high, sometimes kids and families struggle meeting those. And so what this really does is talk about doing a case management process of really connecting kids and families to resources, services, to increase their skills, increase their capacity for change without having kind of that punitive arm that's associated oftentimes with this, again, with the coercive intervention of the court. And finally, to another example of institutionalizing this work, to make sure that as we work with our community partners, that expectations are clearly identified in memorandums of understanding, that we know what we expect from the agency or the resource, they know what to expect from us. And this wouldn't be a JDAI initiative in any way if we didn't talk a lot about the data and data quality. You know, how are we going to know if something's working? We don't want to depend on anecdotal gut stories. We want to be able to point at the data that says, yes, this is what we did. These were the outcomes that we set out for, and this is the outcome that we've received. And frankly, if we're not getting those outcomes, come back to the table and say, what do we need to change? What needs to be modified? Any questions?
Thank you, Christine. Next is me. The next slide, please. New services and programs for Monroe County youth and families. I want to stress that it is for the county folks here. This is not justice involved youth. It is not just for youth shelter, youth who are in the shelter, who presently or have been in the shelter. So the programs and services we're going to talk about are, there's not going to be a requirement for almost all of them that there's a referral to probation or any requirement for them to be clients of the shelter in terms of the residential. So the focus is going to be on prevention and front-end diversion. Next slide, and to Vicki.
Good evening. The services and the programs that we want to pilot and try. The first one is the Youth Substance Abuse Services. And we tried seeking safety in February of 2020, but COVID made us suspend it because substance abuse in adolescent groups really needs to be in person. Virtual just doesn't work. Building that trust is really hard over the computer. The second would be truancy program and diversion. We were about ready to pilot that, had worked really hard with MCCSC and RBB, and we're very excited about this and working with probation and the prosecutor's office. But again, we weren't able to do that. Everything went virtual. It's really an individualized intensive case management with the family to work on. Truancy is usually a symptom of something else, but to work with the family comprehensively to figure out why are the kids not going to school. Functional family therapy, for those of you who've been around a long time, we've offered that in the community in the past. We want to bring it back. It is a short-term family counseling program that will work with whenever there's conflict in the family, and often when you have teenagers, that is just the case. A youth advisory council, Christine mentioned that, and we can really, this allows us to draw from ideas and to get feedback from youth in our community and give the youth a voice and to really hear what do they think we need to offer, what resources do they want. The fifth one is the parenting program. I can tell you now that that is something we get the most inquiries about. It's also something that the emergency room management at the hospital has said when they have youth brought in who have behavioral issues or concerns, the parents just say, where can I turn for help? Who can I talk to? Is there anyone else in this community whose kids are acting like this? So we want to offer that to any parent in our community. Expanding restorative justice programming. We've had VORP since the 70s, Victim Offender Reconciliation Program, and CJAM now, and Christina's talked extensively about CCLP's recommendation on that, and we support that completely. Flex funding program is really about a pot of resources where we can reduce barriers for pro-social activities for families or assist them in getting the services they need. That could be paying fees for sporting group or bus passes. It could be any number of things. We've had that in the past, but it's been a long time. Case management services for community and youth families. I will tell you that this is being offered in a couple of places in Monroe County, but I can also tell you that the waiting lists are long and we have immediate needs. So we're talking about community-based counseling for families who can't get it any other way and for more immediate case management, particularly crisis intervention situations, and to continue with that family. Quest Case Management System. Some of you know that that's what Probation Community Corrections, part of the Prosecuting Attorney's Office, and several other places use for data collection. And we have a standalone, YSB has a standalone data software program that is not user-friendly or helpful in terms of reporting to you. And we would like to join them. And so we have a comprehensive database for the county for our youth services across the board for probation, courts, anybody that wants to join. And we would need some help in getting that, a data specialist to help us with that. And then increased non-residential diagnostic evaluations. We're talking about psychological evaluations of behavior to determine the level of treatment needs or medication evaluation in a situation where we do not want the youth to have to miss school or leave their community. And to be able to, maybe they would be in the shelter while this happened, maybe not, but we could be a place that could coordinate that for the courts. It's something that right now to get an evaluation in a residential setting, you can wait months. And it requires the youth to be sent out of county for 30 days, missing school, and it's very disruptive. So, next slide. In order to offer those programs and services, we would need 5 staff. A youth engagement specialist, which would focus on prevention, on the Youth Advisory Council. Case manager, which would work with some of the programs that we want to offer, and specifically with the schools and the truancy diversion program. We would need 2 counselors to run all of the groups and programs for both the adults and the youth and families in the community. And the data specialist would get us up and running on Quest and help us gather and analyze the data that we'd have to collect if we want to evaluate these programs. These are pilot programs. We want evidence-based, we want to evaluate them, we want to report back and see if they're successful. If they are, then we want to build them into what we do. And we want to, and if not, then we want to look at a different kind of program. Any questions on that before I turn it over to Troy? Talk about money. Okay, Troy.
So if you go to the next slide, you know, being the county council and being the funding body for the county, I'm sure you're interested in costs. So what we have here is what we feel like would be the approximate personnel costs for that first year, and this includes the salary and fringe benefits of the staff that Vicki had mentioned. And we would also anticipate probably around $170,000 in non-personnel startup costs to some of the programs and services to get them going and get them running. As you know, just about everything related to juvenile services in the county is funded by the special purpose local income tax. So if you go to the next slide, I did kind of an evaluation of what things look like with that current fund. Just a little bit of background on that tax rate. That's a special income tax that was included in the Indiana Code. The legislature permitted Monroe County to have this tax rate for juvenile services. It was originally adopted in 2007. Since that time, it has been increased slightly, but it's been at the current rate since 2014, which is substantially lower than what could be what it could be set at in terms of what's permitted by statute. But right now, that tax rate is set at a 0.095%. And what that does, you can see in terms of the line where it says revenue, you can see what that tax rate brings into the fund each year. Now, what you have from 2018 to 2021 is both the tax revenue and any miscellaneous revenue that's been dumped into that fund. From 2022 on to 2025, well, 2022, I used the tax rate that we expect now. But going into the future, I basically took what that growth of the tax rate was in the previous years, averaged that out, came to 3.682%, and then added that to the tax revenue growth. So what you see for 23, 24, and 25 is really for the revenue coming into that fund as projected is just the tax rate that we have, or the tax revenue we have now in 2022, and then multiplied that out by 3.682% for each year moving forward. So that kind of gave us a projection of revenues, what we expect into that fund. When I looked at expenditures, I took every expense that's currently in the fund, every personnel line that's currently in there, and then projected that out from what we know everything is set at in 2022, including any incremental step raises for staff that are in those funds, and tagged on an additional 3% as just kind of an estimate of what that growth could be in terms of expenses. That 3% was also carried on into your 20s, 30s, and 40s into those different funds to show you kind of what those expenses might be over the next several years. Basically, what you can see is that fund continues to increase its cash balance. We have fewer expenditures than we do the revenue that's coming in. If you project that out going from 22 on through 2025, you can see that cash balance is expected to grow between $400,000 and $500,000 per year. So in my estimate, I think this fund could safely entertain an additional $400,000 to $500,000 in expenses each year and still maintain a very healthy cash balance into that fund. And so that's what you see here on this chart. This chart that you have does not include any of the expenses that we're proposing in it. This just shows you what the existing expenses are projected out for the next several years to give you an idea of what this fund could handle in terms of any additional expenses. So, and I'll be around for other questions, and I'd like to just turn it back over to Vicki with the next slide, I think.
Okay, let me sum it up. We've given you a list of programs that we'd like to add, a list of the new ISB staff it would take to implement the programs. There's sufficient cash balance in special purpose lit to hire the staff and to start this programming in 2022 if allowed. There are financial projections for lit that shows this fund would have enough revenue in the future to sustain it. And we're asking you to consider it and see if you have any questions.
Wow, thank you. That's a lot. It's impressive. It's exciting. Let's start with some questions. Councilor Deckard.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate this information. Particularly, I appreciate that analysis at the very end of potential revenue and the growth from Mr. Hatfield. I guess the two-part question I have is, number one, I always like that you all talk about evidence base and data and using that data. Would this be evidence that would then be supplied to other portions of the state? Would we be a leader in that? I know that's always helpful, and certainly Indiana could always use that. That'd be the first part of that question. And the second part would be, how quickly could we get started with your proposal to put it into action? I know 2022 is listed, but is that like next meeting, 1 month, etc.? I'd love to hear your comment.
I want to answer the second question for sure. It is my hope, if there is a favorable discussion about this proposal, that we could ask to have a PAC meeting to look at these positions, possibly the job descriptions in March, and that we would come back to you in April asking for the appropriation. And so I could see getting the staff on board, trained, ready, and possibly implementing the programming. Oh, I'm probably gonna really be sorry I said this, as quickly as the fall of 2022. So that would be my hope. In terms of sharing data, of course, we want to share it statewide, be a pilot program, anything that we can do to help. Linda, do you or Judge or anyone else want to answer these questions?
I would say one thing for sure is other communities haven't made the investment that you all have, that we have in terms of Youth Services Bureau, being able to provide services to families who may not have the funds to be able to access those kinds of services. So I would say we would be a leader in the state in being able to provide these kinds of services to anyone. You don't have to get involved in the juvenile justice system or the CHIN system to get DCS to pay for your services. And right now, that's kind of how it is in most counties. Otherwise, people are on their own to pay for those. So I think we would be a leader. And Judge Galvin, you might speak up, but I think we would be a leader in the state of Indiana.
You're muted.
It was a great lead in. I'd like to think that we're always a leader in the state of Indiana, or at least we try to be. But I would definitely think that we would share data. I've been on for many years. I've state through JDAI, through the chair of the Juvenile Justice Improvement Committee. I'm the chair of the subcommittee for Cross Systems Youth right now for the Children's Commission. So we have a lot of input for folks, and we try to provide that, and we will continue to do so.
Okay, Councilor McKim.
Thank you. I have two questions. One I think is very simple. You mentioned that there are other organizations in the community that are providing case management services for community youth and families, but just not enough. Who else is providing those types of case management services?
Well, I believe please anybody correct me if I give wrong information. Family Solutions does, but you have to be referred by either probation or the Department of Child Services. So we would not be duplicating services there. I think Ireland might. I don't know enough about what they offer and how you can get a referral there to speak to that. I'm not sure of any other agencies besides those two, Centerstone, but the waiting list there has been reported to us to be months long. I hope I have accurate information.
Thank you.
I think that's pretty accurate.
Thank
I
you.
know. Well, I apologize. DCS also has prevention dollars that they spend, which again, they utilize local sources. I think for us, what this is going to allow us to do is to focus on children who may be, to provide our own prevention for individuals who may be facing the possibility of entering delinquency court. We'd like to keep them as far away from that as we can get. So while there is some overlap, we can go into, I know, Jeff, there are other areas. You might ask, do we have substance abuse overlap? Well, it comes and goes. Over the years, we've had substance abuse services for children which appear and disappear. I've gone through in the time that I've been involved, probably 7-8 different iterations of intensive outpatient programming for juveniles. So this allows us to have control and to move forward with the children that we see, but You can also see that we want to reach out to the whole community and to try and make it available. But the goal is to definitely try to address delinquency issues as part of this.
Thank you. I'll wait for my second question until it comes around again.
Counselor Munson.
Thank you. I want to first thank Vicki Seveno and Troy Hatfield for the financial information, because I hadn't seen that when I first learned about this program. And I was immediately excited by the range of services that could help our youth and families. What I'm interested in, knowing that we have other services in the county, is what do you see as the priorities for developing your range of services, your new range of services?
Who wants to answer that, Judge?
Well, I think to some extent, when you look at the list, it's kind of self-explanatory. We truly are trying to divert children from the system, trying to keep them from entering the system. Almost everything you're seeing here addresses that. Not everything, but most things. It also fills some gaps for us. Right now, as Vicki pointed out, if I need to get a psychological evaluation on a child, I generally am faced with either placing that child outside the home in order to get that evaluation. That can take a month or more, or waiting 2 months, 3 months in order to get a psychological evaluation. So these are the kind of things we're trying to address. I'm just waving at maintenance right here. We're good. Thank you. Did that answer, Cheryl, did that answer your question? Do you feel like?
Yes, I know you you have a lot to develop, and it looks like our community can afford these important services. And I'm just wondering how you are planning to start on this, and what comes first.
I can tell you that because we already were ready to pilot the substance abuse and the truancy programs 2 years ago, we are ready to go forward with those pretty quickly. I think there is a huge number of families in this community who say, my child is using drugs. I don't want to call the police on them, but we need help. Where would I take them? Well, to get individual counseling, they can wait as long as 6 months. So having that group available for families who don't have to report their children necessarily would be a priority. I think the truancy program, I can tell you that MCCSC and RBB have been begging for help with truancy issues for years, trying to not have to put the kids in the system. So we're hopeful to do that right away. I think we could throw a youth advisory council in without too much work, a little recruitment. It's also important. It's hard for me to say what is most important, but that's where we would start because we've already done the groundwork for those programs.
That was excellent to hear. Thank you.
Counselor Iverson.
Let me start out with some comments, and I have a question. First of all, I really want to thank this team for their leadership, and in particular, you, Linda. One of the things that I found incredibly helpful was reaching out and saying, what do you want to hear? What do you want this presentation to look like? What's beneficial for you all? And I just, that just goes so far into building trust and to building this relationship that we have for the benefit of the children. So I wanted to really publicly thank you for that step. And the second comment that I have is that, as we're looking into what to do about criminal justice as a whole in this county, it's very refreshing to hear the entire team echoing about the value of restorative justice. It's just so helpful to hear that we share similar values in this community and that we're all marching to the same beat. So I'm really thankful to hear all of that. My question is centering around one of the proposed programs, and that is the family therapy program. I think I heard it correctly that this is intended to be a short-term program. Do I have that correct?
Functional family therapy.
Yes,
Lynn
yes.
is our expert. She can speak to it in great detail.
So functional family therapy it's one of the best evidence-based programs as far as youth that, I mean, it's been well studied, well documented, and it has phenomenal results. So we were very lucky to have such a program here in Bloomington quite a few years ago, but the staff who had been trained in that have left the agencies, and the trainer, he is actually a Bloomington resident, Dr. Tom Sexton. He's a Bloomington/Amsterdam resident. He divides his time between Bloomington and Amsterdam. He is available by Zoom, and he has offered to train our staff again and monitor and help make sure we re-implement it. But he was the one who implemented it years ago. We had great success. They were actually able to publish a study about the effectiveness of functional family therapy on our youth and families here. And we also did an adult functional family therapy for adults on probation, so which Tom was part of a study on that. So we do know it's successful. We've had it before, lost it, we won it back.
Yeah, and the need, as you know, in the community is so great. And I just can't speak highly enough about a program of this regard. So I'll save my additional questions for the next round.
Counselor Hawks.
Yes, you know how I feel about youth services. Get excited. There's some great legislation working through right now, and I wondered, when I heard some of that, I thought, I bet this is something we'll be working with, and you perhaps are following that as well. I sent somebody some information on it, but I forget what the bill number was. But if you haven't watched it, try to find out if that's something we would want to work with as well. That's one question. The other thing is to be very clear, we're the financial end. While all of this is interesting, our job is to understand the financing. Where does the money come from and where's it going to go? Now, first of all, we know the money comes from local people that live here. That's where the income tax comes from. If you don't live here, you're not paying income tax here. You may be earning a living here, but you're paying your income tax in some other county. So it's real important to hire local folks. But the reason why I'm saying that is, my question is, I know that we have young people that come in from other areas into our youth shelter, and that to me would, since we're going to grow services, hopefully we're talking about we're serving Monroe County folks. Or are you saying whoever shows up at the door? Because as we know, the other counties aren't doing it. So they will be here because these parents need help. So how can we work with the other counties to get them to be, if we're going to provide services to the other counties, how can we work with them to make sure they're paying their fair share? Bad question, I know, but it's one that the council needs to be asking.
I think you know, Marty, that we won't turn away a youth because they're not from here, but we prioritize Monroe County youth, and we've been very lucky that we have never had to turn away someone because we didn't have room. We're allowed by license to have a few extra cots. In terms of services, serving youth outside of the families, outside of Monroe County, I don't know that we've had that discussion as a group. So you've brought up a point that I don't know how to answer. Judge, do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, for those individual children placed at the shelter in the short term from out of county, which we receive per diem payments for from DCS, I would assume that they could be impacted by this, and that's to be expected. Now, when you go beyond that, when we're talking about some of the other things that are very specific, such as the diagnostic evaluations, a truancy program. I don't know how we would operate a truancy program, for instance, for out-of-county youth. But I could foresee that they could get some substance abuse treatment while they're here, while they're in placement. So I think that I wouldn't want to discount that. And I would think that that is something that we would want to make available to them, for instance, substance abuse treatment, if we were able to do so, if they were with us for a sufficient amount of time. But when you look at the other things that are included here, parenting, that's going to be Monroe County Youth and Parent and Families, flex funding, obviously, Monroe County.
Okay, that's exactly what I was hoping to hear, because of course, if they're already placed here, and we know we're not going to turn some young folks away that need to have a bed. I mean, we just wouldn't ever. And they should receive services while they're there, of course. But what my concern was with the family counseling and all these other new services that would be someone who's not placed, somebody that wants to stay out of the system, who just wants to come in and talk with somebody saying, I'm having trouble with my young son or daughter. That we're making sure that we're providing those services to Monroe County folks, since they are the ones paying the bill. And if the other counties want to participate and pay so much for every person who shows up at the door needing counseling, I just think maybe there's some other regional dollars for it. Maybe that's what's going on at the state level. But I think we do have to watch that carefully.
Councillor McKim.
Thanks. This is a question I wish I had sent to you all in advance, but you talk a lot about data, and clearly there's some serious effort in this plan towards gathering and making use of data. I'm just kind of curious what the kind of big picture metrics that you might be looking at to see if you're going in the right direction. If this is having an impact.
Raise a great question, Jeff, and I admit that I'm not sure I'm the most qualified individual to answer it. But if you look at some of the things that we pursued through JDAI, when we look at not just simply things like recidivism, but length of stay, our criteria and the impact of the criteria on placement of children, those are the kinds of things that we've already done. But when it comes to really diving into the data at this point, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to say this is what criteria we're most looking for. I guess one of the things I'd point out is that I'm always amazed by what we do find during the JDAI process. I'll ask somebody who has a better handle on that. Lewis probably, as he raises his hand, is going to bail me out. Lewis?
In terms of program evaluation, there are lots of metrics, and we would lean on some of our community partners like IARCA and IYSA to say we're rolling some of these out. What are some metrics that have worked in the past? So we can build that in as we are looking at moving these forward. So there are already other metrics that through our CARF accreditation and things like that, that the data specialists already be gathering for us, and that DCS requires for us to have our contract and things like that. So there would be plenty of things for them to gather, and then we would also be building into the programming evaluation processes, which is pretty typical, but we don't have those metrics at this time as we are beginning to pilot some of this. But we would have them, and we could definitely bring those back to you in the future once those are developed.
And if you look at it program by program, I think one of the things that Vicki said really needs to be stressed. We've always been an entity that tries new things, but if they don't work, we don't keep them. And we try to do things that we find do work. And the only way to know whether or not what we're doing works is to have the data that we need to analyze that data appropriately. That's true for our substance abuse programming. It's true for truancy programming. We had a truancy, I ran a truancy court for a number of years, as I think you know, and I came to the conclusion in analyzing the data that while we were really doing a pretty good job of running what amounted to a child in need of services court component, almost, children that we were dealing with as truants were having real emotional problems, mental health problems, drug and alcohol problems. We were not increasing the graduation rate. And we found at that point that we couldn't justify maintaining that particular programming. So we would like to be able to dive much deeper into these programs than we have just in my analysis of that prior truancy court. And this would give us the opportunity to do that. We want to do what works.
Thank you very much for those thoughtful answers. And I guess I know one of the things that it sounded like you wished as an outcome of this meeting was to get some direction from the council. And I would just say, just speaking for myself, I very much hope you move forward with this plan. So as a member of PAC, I would look forward to seeing the position descriptions or the draft descriptions coming forward.
Yes, and I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads on council. So really appreciate the work you've put into just even the presentation for us, much less all of the planning on these programs. It's really exciting to see something like this that promises a lot of impact. And I, for one, am pretty excited to be located in the county that's creating the programs and services. I'm going to suggest that any further questions be directed via email to the team, just in the interest of moving our agenda forward. But thanks again, and please proceed, and we will see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. We actually have Linda Brady again for our next item. Yeah.
Darn it, I thought I was getting away.
No. Trent.
Council, I move to approve the probation department's request to add clarifying language to the job description for the probation officer assistant part-time.
Second.
Yeah, do you want to give us just an overview real quick?
Yes, I brought this before the PAC already and had a favorable recommendation to bring it to the full council. Basically, with the probation officer assistants, one of their primary jobs is doing observed urine drug testing. And we match by gender, the collector to the client. And we've been having quite a bit of trouble hiring males for whatever reason. And I wanted to be able to advertise when we need males or females that we can advertise specifically. And I was advised by the county legal that to do that, we needed to put that into the job description, that we do observed urine drug testing with persons of the same gender. And then David Schilling suggested adding gender identity to that. So this is based on recommendation from legal, so that we can try to seek employees that match what the job needs.
Okay.
That's it.
With recommendations from legal and PAC. Okay. Ducks are in a row, so let's go to questions. Councilor Iverson.
Just wanted to say that we had a really great conversation about this in PAC, and I wanted to highlight the comments made by Councilmember McKim during that session to really highlight the fact that our understanding of gender is changing, and that we really need to be inclusive when it comes to gender. So that was a really great conversation, and I'm glad we had it. So I'm glad to forward a positive recommendation here.
Are there any other questions or comments on this item? Okay, great. I think we can ask for public comment. And checking. Oh, Counselor Hawk.
Do we need to read exactly the wording that we're putting in there for the change? Do you? The change, does that need to be read into it? I don't care one way or the other.
I don't think it does because we don't read job description language typically.
It's not necessary for me. I just thought that was the purpose of having.
Well, we've also said we're not changing any job descriptions this year. So I think the purpose here is that this is necessary, just by our own kind of declaration.
Yeah, that's right. Right, never. Okay.
Yes, I wouldn't have brought it before if it wasn't from county legal making that recommendation.
Right.
Counselor McKim?
I just want to make it clear that the position description with the changes we've discussed were published in the packet. So we're not making any changes from what's already been published. Otherwise, I would agree with Counselor Hawk. If we were making a change here on the floor, then we would need to read that change. But that change was made during the committee, has already been published.
If any member of the public wanted to see it, could just look at the packet.
The packet.
Okay.
Great. Any other comments? Any public comment? And could we have a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Deckard,
Yes.
Counselor Wiltz,
Yes.
Counselor McKim,
Yes.
Counselor Munson,
Yes.
Counselor Hawk,
Yes.
Counselor Iverson,
Yes.
Counselor Crossley.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now in our journey through this meeting, we come to item 11, the aviation department. Council, we've received the 2021 aviation annual report. And now we're going to hear from Carlos Laverty, our airport director, to give us a brief report from his department. Welcome, Carlos.
Hi, good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure. I was just brushing up on my Russian while I was waiting. So I've been asked to give a brief presentation on our annual report, which I really appreciate the opportunity. I think it's an excellent opportunity for myself to kind of get in front of the council and just talk about things that have happened and what we're looking forward to. And I hope we get the opportunity to do some of this a little bit more often. One of the things that I've learned when putting this presentation together was just how terribly long-winded I am. I had about 19 or 20 slides, and I said, hey, I'll save everybody a little bit of time and I'll record the PowerPoint presentation. And I hit save to video, went to lunch, came back and found out I had a 35-minute presentation. So this afternoon, I spent a few, I compressed it down to 14 minutes just to be able to make it presentable tonight. So TSD has that presentation, they'll play it. It might seem a little bit choppy, and that is why I had to cut that thing in half to make it fit tonight. But I'll be available for kind of a little bit of Q&A after the presentation, and I hope it makes sense.
Great.
I guess that's the key, the cue there. Hopefully it plays. I don't know who's got it.
Yes, TSD, I think you've got it.
Yeah. If it doesn't, if I could probably screen share it. I've got it here somewhere.
I know I have it. TSD, did you receive my email?
Kim, you want to screen share it?
Yep, I'll do it.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. Someone's going here.
Okay, in order to have sound sharing though, we you have to optimize the screen sharing for sound. It's just it's a toggle at the bottom when you start the screen share window. Okay, am I the only one not hearing this?
No, I don't hear it.
Okay.
I don't hear.
So
We're going to be. Yeah, I heard some sound. It's coming. The Monroe County Board of Aviation Commissioners for 2021 was comprised of Dr. Pugh as president, Ken Ritchie as vice president, Pat Murphy treasurer, and Gene Devane secretary. All of those gentlemen have been on the board for multiple years. Gene, most notably, with over 34 years of serving on the airport board during two different tenures. So 2021 was kind of the year of uncertainty. We had come out of the worst of the pandemic, unbeknownst to us at that time, and we just didn't know what to expect. We didn't know how long the lockdowns were going to drag on, if more were coming. We didn't know what air travel trends were going to be like. So 2021 was kind of the year in limbo. Well, we just kind of waited to see what was going to happen. We couldn't really plan for very much when it came to marketing or community outreach. And I just feel like it was a little bit of a wasted year as far as those endeavors. However, as you'll see a little bit later on, it ended up being a very significant year for us for revenue generation and air traffic operation levels. We saw quite the rebound in 2021. Coming out of the pandemic in 2021, the Monroe County Airport, along with thousands of airports across the country, was the recipient of several COVID relief grants and from bills that came out of Congress to kind of help stabilize and prop up our country's transportation infrastructure. The first bill was the CARES Act grant in I think the early portion of 2020. It was a $10 billion bill, and the Monroe County Airport's share of that was $69,000. Didn't have too many stipulations. So far, we've only used 15 of it for some upgrades on our air traffic control recording system, the radio recording system. The next bill we received came out at the very tail end of 2020. It was the CRRSAA, quite the mouthful. That was a $2 billion bill. Our portion of that was $57,000. We started seeing more stipulations on that, specifically for COVID sanitization and facility cleaning. And then in early 21, we received the ARPA grant. That was a $30 billion bill out of Congress. Our portion of that was $59,000, even more stipulations. Each bill got subsequently more restrictive about how we can use those dollars. We're actually still waiting for some further clarification from the FAA on how to best use those dollars. So we have not touched those yet. We are still sitting on those until we get some solid word on the best uses and the best authorized uses of those dollars. In 2021, the airport acquired a wonderful piece of software, VirTower. It serves as a virtual radar tower via an ADS-B antenna, which tracks the transponder signals that all aircraft, virtually all aircraft, send out to the sky. That information is collected by satellites, and that's how you're using apps like FlightAware and FlightRadar. Well, we have our own antenna here on our air traffic control tower that collects that information from just about any plane within 400 or 500 miles, and it allows us to track all aircraft that come and go from our airport, who they belong to, the type of aircraft they are, and it allows us to better and more efficiently assess landing fees and bill for those landing fees for our heavy users over 12,500 pounds. As you can see on the left, it'll also give us a real in time, up to the second look of all aircraft in our airspace, and we provide that information on a screen to our air traffic control tower to use as a visual aid when they are controlling our airspace. And it's just another tool, another way for the Monroe County Airport to provide a very safe operating environment for our air users. Another acquisition for the airport, and something I find very exciting, was the acquisition of AeroSimple. And it's a software suite specific to airports that have to comply with FAA Regulation 139, where we have all these additional inspections and documentation and training that we have to show the FAA if we're going to receive these air carrier flights. So we have to live up to the same requirements that IND or even Chicago O'Hare does when it comes to the training of our staff, the training of our firefighters, and the inspection and maintenance requirements on our airfield. And it's because we service these airliners, these air charters, when the Big Ten teams come and go. So this software suite for inspections, the documentation of training replaces binders and binders of handwritten notes and materials and logs that we've collected over the years, and it puts it all in this cloud-based suite that we can then go on and update items on our iPads, our iPhones, and our computers, and it's all saved in the cloud, and we can use it remotely when we're out on the airfield doing our inspections. It's wonderful. Our FAA capital improvement project for 2021 was the main runway lighting replacement. As the council should recall, our main runway lighting system had reached the end of its useful life, was no longer able to be maintained, and we requested a pop-up project with the FAA to basically put this to the top of our list. It was approved with a lot of support from the community and our legislators writing letters to the FAA to help justify this project leapfrogging the rest. About $3 million. It replaces all of the cabling, circuitry, incandescent lights, the hundreds of lights on our main runway, the incandescent directional signs, and it replaces everything with new cabling and state-of-the-art LED technology for the main runway. It was approved. However, due to COVID, there were a lot of material shortages that still exist today. So until we have enough material in place, which we expect to be April, that project with the FAA's approval has been pushed back to begin early summer of this year. We're really excited about this project. It'll really increase the reliability and functionality of our main runway lighting system. As a note, for 2022, we're going to submit for the taxiway, the main taxiway that parallels the runway. We are going to submit to convert that entirely over to LED lighting as well. At the end of 2020, there was a lot of certainty going into the next year, all related due to COVID. We just didn't know what was going to happen with air travel and here locally. So the airport thought it prudent to just keep our budget flat, not put any additional burden on the county for support going into 2021. That budget was approved flat, except for whatever personnel adjustments were required by council. The airport collects 9 cents per gallon of fuel sold out here, and our 2 FBOs sell all the fuel, BMG Aviation and Cook. And as you can see, when COVID hit 2020, we took a significant hit to that fuel revenue. However, we just had our second best fuel year in the last 10. So this is very promising. We're really excited to see this, and I think it's a signal of a strong rebound, at least in air travel post-COVID. Wanted to cover this graph. It looks worse than it is, and here's why. In the past, the airport showed what was billed in that year, and that went on the graph. Beginning in 2020, I insisted that we put down what we receive, what we have receipts for. So this graph should catch up in time. It just looks worse than it is, and I wanted to make sure we cover that. ARF revenue, by the way, for those who don't know, that is the money that we collect for providing aircraft rescue, firefighting, standby services when we have an air charter come in, an aircraft with 30 or more seats. And it's pretty much all the Big Ten teams, either IU coming or going, or a team that's playing IU when they charter with one of the airlines. Looks worse than it is. I want to make sure we cover that. Another graph that I wanted to explain was our landing fees. As you can see, we're collecting significantly more landing fees in the last year, but there's another reason for that. The airport is enforcing the collection of those landing fees like never before. In the past, although we had the right to collect on landing fees on aircraft, they really weren't. The airport really wasn't unless it was an air carrier aircraft. We collect a certain amount of a landing fee based on landed weight of that aircraft over 12,500 pounds. Well, we're enforcing that like never before with systems like VirTower. It's really enabled us to track aircraft that come and go from the airport like we have never been able to in the past. So with that, you can see the significant increase in landing fee revenue for the Monroe County Airport. This shows what we received for land leases where someone has decided or wanted to build their own private hangar and just lease the land from the airport. There really hasn't been very much new development when it comes to private hangar development or any kind of land leases that may be non-aeronautical. This is one of those things that we're looking to focus on here in the near future, especially when it comes to the 55-acre parcel that was acquired in 2018. We're really looking hard on working with the county and county planning and city to see that property developed. This number is on hangars that are built and owned or have been acquired by the Monroe County Airport over time and that we lease back out. This is our 48 T hangars and several other corporate box hangars that we have on property that we own. We either built them ourselves or that lease has matured and that property has reverted back to airport ownership, and then we lease it back out. Office rent has been improving after a few years of no office rent. We, as everybody kind of knows, we have the Barber here in the airport admin building, and then Ivy Tech put their automotive department, their automotive technology department, in one of the existing airport structures. It used to be our old maintenance facility, and there was a couple of garage bays, and it turned out to be an excellent location for Ivy Tech. So in 2020, they relocated here, and we count that towards office rent. So non-aviation, Barber, Ivy Tech, but still allowable by FAA code. So we're going to take advantage of it. And like I mentioned earlier, we're going to see what we can do in other parts of the airport that are not tied into the airfield to generate some non-aeronautical revenue in those areas. The air traffic control tower is a contract tower. It is not federal, so we have to pay a share to operate that tower. The Monroe County share for that air traffic control tower is a little over $82,000. The total cost of the annual operation is $515,000. We're getting a pretty good deal, 16% share. This is the slide that gives me the most optimism coming out of 2020. 2021 was our third busiest year out of the last 10 for all aircraft operations, either private or commercial, you name it. And we only missed our second best year by about 30 flights. So coming out of the worst year ever in the pandemic, we're bouncing right back. It's strong, and it gives me a lot of optimism for the Monroe County Airport in 2022. Just a little note here showing our monthly average operations. Pretty consistently now, the busiest time of year for the Monroe County Airport is leading up to the commencement of the school year, and then really football season, basketball season, and then we see a lull in the first couple quarters of the year. I encourage anyone to come out and look at our ramp during the move-in period for IU right before school starts. The ramp is just hopping. It's quite the sight. Thanks for your time. I think as we've kind of displayed here, 2020 and 21 were very unique, very difficult times, but as the data shows, we are recovering significantly and having some milestone years here, and I think that trend is going to continue. We'll see though. COVID is still around. Well, we'll see what's in store, but I think there's a lot more optimism than pessimism. I'm here if you have any further questions, and thanks for your time.
Thanks, Carlos. That was very interesting. Very well done. Good editing skills as well. Counselor Hawk. Oh.
So many times, folks who are not accustomed to understanding what we do at the airport and why it makes a difference to them, they'll say, well, I'm never going to get on a plane out there. Why should my local taxes pay for it? And what this is all about is, if you heard when Mr. Lafferty is going through what's happening out there, we know this is all about making good jobs available. We're not going to grow the kind of jobs that we want in this county and what we've been able to grow simply because we have the airport. These folks would not be moving here and bringing their jobs here if we didn't have this airport for their transportation for people to come in and out, as well as what's going on out at IU all of the time. And we just have so much to be grateful for that we had and have had for years. People who cared about the airport, made sure that we made it a viable part of our job creation. So whether you ever use that airport or not, you are using what that airport is providing, which is the jobs in tourism as well. I mean, you understand, you heard what he was talking about, how it helps create the tourism dollars. So
yeah, we not only bring in the big charters, for the teams, and folks coming to watch games, but we receive a significant amount of corporate flights, people flying in on jets for big business meetings, big business decisions. We have some very large business entities in the community, and they don't always drive their executives to fly out of IND. They're executives who are paid pretty well, and they can't afford to have them sitting in a car back and forth to Indy multiple times in a week. They're utilizing this airport to get their job done, their deals made. So you're right, Marty. There's so much that this airport offers to the community. This 6,500 foot long strip of asphalt really connects Bloomington to the world in a way that the interstate can't, and IND can't as well.
Councilor McKim.
First of all, Carlos, thanks. Terrific report. This was really interesting. I found the landing fees graph intriguing also, and quite impressive. I mean, I'm certainly glad that we're applying our fees in an even-handed manner. I'm just curious if you got any pushback from pilots or owners.
Yeah.
Started being stricter about the fees.
Yeah, it's a very excellent question, very fair question. And actually, no. Well, of course, yeah, there were some conversations had, but honestly, we've built almost thousands of aircraft over since the end of 2020, since September 2020 is when we started. And I think we've had maybe 3 complaints. One was a fella who has a home in like Boca Raton and another home up somewhere in Minneapolis, and refused to ever bring his private jet here again because we were charging him a $12 landing fee. And I said, okay, all right, okay, nice knowing you, but it is what it is. But because he was a long-standing customer of the airport and he wasn't informed of the landing fee beforehand, I waived his $12 fee, and he said he might come back someday. So hopefully we see him. And and the other one of the biggest and most significant complaints we received was from one of our FBOs, our resident service providers. They fuel aircraft and they provide charters. And they were really concerned that, the implementation of these landing fees was going to drive people off. And I think that was a very legitimate concern, but we worked with them. And one of the things about Monroe County Airport is historically they've been very hesitant to implement these fees, but we kind of had the conversations and we discussed the fact that these fees are at airports all over the country and the world. You leave the United States and the landing fees are very expensive. They're very low here, very conservative. You fly a $3 million, old King Air, which is about 12,500 pounds. When they fill up with fuel, they're paying about $1,000 of fuel. And they're doing this day in, day out, all across the country, paying, lodging fees for their air crew to stay at hotels across the country. They don't bat an eye at a $10, $12 landing fee. And after about a few months of the landing fees and realizing that nobody was flinching and it wasn't driving anybody away, the complaints kind of took care of themselves.
Thank you. Very, very interesting. Also, just one quick, this is actually a question from a constituent, but has the airport already started to plan for any events out at the airport for the solar eclipse?
We're talking about it. Yeah, I'm glad you asked. It's coming right over airport property, basically. Like
It's just,
right over
Right.
the
No,
quarry.
it's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to come right over the quarry. There's an airport in Tennessee that experienced the same thing a few years ago. And we're reaching out to them and asking them what they did. I'm thinking one of the I shouldn't say this in public, but it's a joke. But we were speaking of landing fees. I'm like, man, we should have like for one day or maybe 2 days, we should charge a $100 landing fee for everybody. But what I hear is that, yeah, people fly in, swarm the airport for a day or two. So we're expecting a big influx of aircraft, and we need to be prepared for that. So that's a very good question.
Cool. Thank you.
Wow. Counselor Iverson.
Yeah, great presentation. Love the video. That's wonderful. As we were talking about people flying in, flying out of our airports, it brought to my mind something that you had talked about before when you come to council, which is not the executives flying out in their private jets, but maybe, like folks like the rest of us. And how there are some smaller airlines that are looking at, these types of airports to do like maybe a ride sharing program or something like that. I don't remember all the details, but, is that 5 years out, 10 years out? What are we looking at here?
Yeah, I don't know. It's the previous to 96, we did have air service. I'm a little fuzzy on that, but there was a point in time and it was heavily subsidized. And if you get over a certain amount of passengers a year, that airline, it's an air service development program. And the FAA has this program where an air carrier will go to like a smaller community. And if they reach, I can't remember the threshold off the top of my head, but a certain amount of passengers, let's just say it's 30,000 a year. If they hit that benchmark, they get $1 million from the FAA to keep it up. And air carriers will make this gamble from time to time in different communities. And sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. They don't like losing. So more and more their decision-making is getting a little bit conservative when it comes to the air service development situations. But like you said, we had talked about this before, there's this new crop of airlines that are popping up. It's called, they're called like boutique airlines. And they don't fly out of a terminal per se, they kind of fly out of a hangar, but there's like a red carpet and there's some sofas in the hangar. They make it comfortable, but they do it kind of on the cheap. But they'll fly you from someplace like, and then they're mostly out west right now, but they would fly you in theory someplace like Bloomington, where there is an economy, and there's people who are making some decent salaries, and they'll do like a once a day or maybe 3 times a week to a connection in Chicago or something. So those are kind of growing in popularity pretty rapidly because they give you like this private jet feel on like a small Embraer or something like that, a small regional jet. And the tickets aren't very bad. So these airlines are something that I personally have on my radar. I'm not going to, we're not in a situation right now where we're going to go for broke and try to attract an air carrier for a couple of reasons. One of them, I'm glad you asked about, because I want to hit on that before I log off tonight. And I'm going to make a note here to mention it. But I think it would be great. But we'd have to get our ducks in a row before that happens. And there's a few things that would make us more attractive to these air carriers. But I think I invited everyone to attend this conference with me in Minneapolis. And I believe at that session, there is going to be, I think it's that conference, there's going to be a roundtable. And it's with an air service development specialist who is connected with he connects airports with these air carriers who are looking for new opportunities. And I'm really curious to kind of hear what they're looking for. I've got friends at other airports across the country. One of my friends just landed their very first airline at an airport in California. So I get to pick his brain quite often. But it's something that's on our radar. And I think Bloomington stands a good chance maybe in the next 5 to 10 years if we get our ducks in a row. And one of the things that I think we would really have to consider and work on if we are serious about attracting air service is the development of a terminal building. And I am not talking about something huge and elaborate. We're just not that market. But there's terminals, and I would kind of consider it something like a community terminal. We right now we're putting about 3,500 air carrier passengers through the airport a year. And those are the athletes, the Big Ten athletes that are coming and going. And right now, when they come or go from our airport, they're doing it either in a garage. Our FBO has a garage, and the athletes come off the bus, they get screened through TSA in a garage, and then they walk out to the airplane. Or if it's a smaller plane that doesn't require TSA, they bus them right up onto the tarmac, then they get out and they get on the plane. Raining or not, snowing or not, doesn't matter. We don't have a proper terminal building. We have a small administrative building that has an awning that goes out to the ramp, but there's nowhere for security. There's no real place for anywhere from 30 to 75 passengers to kind of wait for that airplane. And then when they go out to a plane, they're not really protected from the elements. Right now, as part of that bipartisan infrastructure deal that was passed, the FAA is kind of doing some really cool projects that they almost never do. They're allowing dollars to be spent, federal grant dollars to be spent for terminal buildings and air traffic control towers. That is something that only the big airports typically get to use their passengers facility charges for. We don't get the ability to charge PFCs. But now they're making this pot of money available as part of this BIL program for towers and terminals. So we put our hat in the ring. We told the FAA, we want a tower. Hey, we want a terminal building. It's a Hail Mary shot. It might not work. They might tell us to get lost. But we told the FAA a couple of weeks ago, put us on that list. Let's talk about it. So we'll see if that goes anywhere. Because if they fund that at 90%, that's a once in a lifetime opportunity. The FAA never allows these non-hub airports like us to spend grant money on basically non-airfield capital projects. But because the BIL passed and someone thought it'd be a great idea, we have the opportunity. So that's something that we're throwing that Hail Mary toss up there for.
All right. Thank you.
If it doesn't work, we can have some other conversations down the road, because if we have a community terminal, like I'm kind of envisioning, it could be a lot of things that could serve the community, not even just air passengers. Sometimes if I keep thinking about like movable walls, someplace where you could have like vaccination clinics, a community space where when we don't have these air carrier flights, it could be used for other things. One of the things I found out during 2020 and 2021 was that there seems to be a lack of community spaces like that. I was being contacted and asked if we could hold clinics for various reasons. And because everybody thinks the airport has these big buildings and big open, wide open spaces, and we just don't right now.
Interesting. All kinds of possibilities. That's really cool. Thanks for sharing. Are there any other questions for Mr. Laverty? Well, I just want to say thanks again for being here and sharing all this cool information. It's one thing to read a report, but you really bring it to life when you come visit us. So we appreciate it.
And the offer still stands. Anybody wants a tour of the airport and to see some of the things that we're working on or doing, please just, email me, call me. I'd be happy to show anybody around anytime.
Sounds great. All right. You take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night. All righty. We are on to number 12. And we are back with Penny Goddard from our health department.
Council, I move to open for discussion the health department's request to use state and local fiscal recovery plan funds for the COVID-19 after action report.
Second.
Hello.
Hi, I don't know how I follow those last two reports. They were fantastic. And I will put in a plug for a tour of the airport. Before the pandemic, we had a staff for whenever that was, 3 years ago, whatever. We had a staff retreat and went out and took a tour, and it was fabulous. So learned a lot, staff loved it. So I would encourage you to go take a tour if you haven't. I will try to make this request short. Before Margie Rice left, we had talked about this with the pandemic. We certainly need to do and want to do an after action report so that we can assess what we did well, what we could improve on in the future. I hope that we never see another pandemic, certainly nothing like this, but something will come along and we'll need lessons learned. The preparedness grant that we have does have one of our deliverables is to do an after action report this year. And that grant ends in June, the grant cycle ends in June. And of course, originally when that came out, things will be calming down and we'll be able to, enlist a little bit of help and get that done. But the scale of this pandemic is really beyond our internal capacity. And there have been so many different partners that we need to hear from. That we really felt like we needed that third-party help to do this. And then our partners get to speak more freely because it's not us asking the questions, it's this other person, and we can be a part of those conversations as well. So Margie actually had suggested that this might be appropriate for what was the ARPA funds. We did take this to the commissioners and they actually, they supported the after action report, but felt that there may be other funds that council may support this, but may have other funds that you felt were more appropriate for the help. I don't have an exact, we've started trying to get some estimates, if you will, some quotes. In this, I estimated anywhere from 10 to 40,000. We did actually get a quote that came in yesterday, and we have a call set up with them tomorrow to talk more in detail. And this is the same group, it's Resilient Strategies LLC, and they're the same group that's actually doing the after action reports for the Indiana Department of Health. So certainly this would align with the process that they're using for that. And it came in at just under $7,000. So I was shocked at that price, seemed very reasonable to me, but we're just here to request if there are funds that you have available that you would be willing to put towards this after action report.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from council? Councilor McKim.
I guess my thought on this is the sort of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, which fund it's paid out of. You know, in general, I always think we should use the most restricted funds first, if it's available, in which case that probably the SLURF funds are slightly more restricted than general fund, but not by a lot. They're really, in a way, it's kind of interchangeable. So, you know, I'm certainly fine paying for it out of SLURF if the commissioner supported that and added it to the plan, or, you know, out of the health general, or which is essentially interchangeable with the general fund on a year-to-year basis. So I don't have a strong opinion other than I support the need to do the report.
Counselor Munson?
Hi, Ms. Cottle. You and your department have done amazing with winning grants that support so many important services for our community. Is there any chance that there would be a grant from the State Department of Health or the U.S. Department of Health for just what you have proposed?
Well, we certainly may be able to use, we may have some leftover preparedness funds that we could put towards this so that we could pitch in on that. At this stage of the game, I think even looking for a grant and putting in an application and getting it would be pretty pushing that deadline of when it needs to happen.
Okay.
And we're certainly very willing to put in whatever funds that we have available. But when we started, you know, looking at this and thinking about the potential, the number of partners to talk about, and, you know, every time you have another focus group, that's more money, and it's a bigger report, that may be more than what we would have available.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I certainly feel like we got to do it, and it will certainly be beneficial. You know, we have to learn from our experiences, and that's exactly why this type of report exists. So tonight we are we're just discussing and kind of figuring out what can be done. I've mentioned multiple times that I really do think we need to be just careful about whittling away at ARPA funds. And Councilor McKim has rightly talked to me about, you know, it's all money. And, you know, so, I mean, you know, it does make me a little less protective of that. I'm not, you know, I'm not gonna die on this hill of we can't spend one fund over the other. So, and especially for something around closer to $10,000, that sounds easy to do. Are there any other comments from other counselors? Oh, Councilor McKim.
I mean, I guess if it is truly, if nobody really has a strong opinion one way or the other, then it's probably easiest to just do an additional appropriation out of the health fund, because that was only going to take one step, while putting it in SLURF is going to take two steps. It takes the commissioners to amend the plan and then the appropriation. So, you know, just from the simplicity's sake, you just do an additional appropriation out of health general or something like that. And you know, health general, it really is ultimately equivalent with county general, because we could just, you know, we just adjust the levy the next year.
Councilor Iverson.
And the only other thing I would add to this is, you know, whether it's going to be a $7,000 cost or a $40,000 cost, I think changes it dramatically. So, you know, kind of zeroing down on you know, what this is going to cost to be helpful.
Okay, so I think that coming back to, I mean, this is not something we can appropriate when we don't know exactly what you're looking for. So coming back to us with an additional request would be the way to go. Commissioner Thomas.
Yes, if I might, we are supportive of getting this report done, and we really wanted to bring a total to you with this request at your March meeting, so we can get this moving. But if we hear that you all want to do to use the state and local recovery funding money, we are happy to address that at one of our meetings. We meet every week, so we can address that before you meet in March, if that's your preference. That's really why this is on here, so we could find out if there's a step you need us to take, we're willing to take it. So thank you.
That makes sense. Thanks. I'm thinking do the health fund appropriation, and unless I'm hearing big concerns on that. No, okay. Then that's what we'll plan to do then. Go that direction. Just keep it simple. Councilor Deckard?
Thank you very much. I don't have strong thoughts. I do like Councilor Wiltz. I do often worry about any whittling down of things and how we make sure that we get the most bang for those dollars possible. I can think you can make good arguments on everything for that. I do wholeheartedly support this after action report. And I would even go one step further. I think that people for decades will, hopefully for decades, not out of necessity, but they will want to look at this for a variety of reasons. And I almost would recommend depositing it in places like the History Center, of course, the paper, just places where folks can go back and look. I think we've been doing a lot of that backwards looking to about 100 years ago, and particularly all the awesome response that you and your department and all those things that you dealt with after you did that retreat out at the airport, which, you know, as I look at the clock, digital clock here, it seems like every meeting I'm in Zoom for council, looking at that digital clock and thinking it was about March, about 2 years ago, when all that kind of started. So anyway, it's not lost on you, but I think people will want to look at that for some time.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
And
Appreciate
thank you for waiting through the meeting, beginning and near the end. Appreciate it.
That's all right. Thanks so much. Appreciate the support.
All right. Take care. We are now on to item 14 from the council office.
Council, I move to approve resolution 2022-07 Personnel Administration Committee schedule meetings for 2022 and to forward to all media outlets as required.
Second.
Any questions about this meeting announcement protocol? Councilor Iverson, your hand?
Already talked about it. It's all good.
Okay. Then any public comment on this item? And let's have a roll call vote.
Councilor Iverson,
Yes.
Councilor Munson,
Yes.
Councilor Deckard,
Yes.
Councilor Wiltz,
Yes.
Councilor Hawk,
Yes.
Councilor McKim,
Yes.
Councilor Crossley.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. And item B of the same number.
Council, I move to approve resolution 2022-08 electronic attendance policy for public meetings for the Monroe County Council. Now, therefore, be it resolved that number one, the Monroe County Council wishes to adopt and follow the procedures of newly amended Indiana Code 514 1.5 3.5. Those procedures are listed in Exhibit A, which is attached hereto and incorporated herein. Exhibit A shows language that has been removed from the Indiana Code in a strike-through format, and new language is shown in bold. Number 2, all members of the public shall be admitted to meetings if they wish to participate electronically and shall be able to view or listen to and participate in the meeting under the regular rules allowed for public participation. Number 3, staff members may participate electronically in all meetings, including those listed in subsection I, which are meetings in which all members of a governing body must attend in person, provided there is no actual need for a staff member to be physically present at a particular meeting. Such need shall be determined at the sole discretion of the president or chair of the governing body, unless a majority of the governing body votes to require a staff member to attend a particular meeting.
Second.
Does anyone have any question or comment about this resolution? Counselor Hawk?
Yes. I really, and I shared this at the PAC meeting as well. I really believe that the community wants people to get back to work. And it's hard for us to have an in-person meeting and have staff not in person. And what if we have information we need? What if they don't have it? Whatever. We know what that's like when we get in that courthouse and we maybe need a copy of this, that, or the other thing. And it's really appropriate to have the staff there to be able to provide that assistance. In addition to which, I think if we have departments that have a request, that they also be there in person and we get back to operating in what is the best normal fashion as possible. That's my personal feeling, and you don't have to agree with me, and I'll be pleasant about it no matter what you decide, because I'm hungry.
Me too. Thank you. And I think that the resolution states we can decide later on that. So we're going to adopt a resolution that allows us to have discretion about staff, not requiring it, but we could say that. Is that how you read that? Everyone else?
Madam President, I think that there's flexibility there with the president or chair of the governing body. And I think that reflects some of the things I've heard from particular county staff, employees, department heads.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Is there any public comment on this item? And let's have a roll call vote then.
Counselor Munson,
Yes.
Counselor Iverson,
Yes.
Counselor Hawk,
Yes.
Counselor McKim,
Yes.
Counselor Crossley,
Yes.
Counselor Deckard,
Yes.
Counselor Wiltz.
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously.
Excellent. Item C is going to be very brief. I just want to let you all know that the council office is proceeding with gathering information from Indiana counties in order to inform some decision making at a future meeting. And I will continue to update you, but we are looking across the state at elected officials' salaries and relevant information. That's, if you have questions, you can ask me. Okay. I'm going to move on to council comments. Do we have anyone who would like to make a comment? Councilor McKim.
Yes, so first, as many of you already know, our planning director, Larry Wilson, will be retiring at the end of this month, which is just a few short days away. Larry has served Monroe County as the planning director for over 11 years, which is a really long tenure for a planning director. And we will miss his leadership and expertise greatly. By rule, the Assistant Planning Director, Jackie Nestor Jelen, will automatically serve as Acting Planning Director, and the Plan Commission has an active search and process for a permanent replacement. And then second, on a different matter, I'm really hoping that, that we can all, council and commissioners, figure out a way to work constructively with the city to finally move forward on expanding our Monroe Convention Center. And we've now been collecting the food and beverage tax from both local diners and visitors for 4 years. And I think we can all agree that the revenue from that tax has exceeded all expectations, even during a pandemic that temporarily completely shut restaurants down. I think we owe it to the people who are paying this tax to use it for what we told the public we were adopting the tax for, to expand our county's convention center. And I know the annexation attempt has made it challenging to work constructively with the city, but I'm hoping that as the dust clears from that, we can figure out a way to move forward together. You know, and in addition, although I don't want to spend time here talking about the details, there is some live legislation in Indianapolis that may set some time limits on the tax. In any case, I really hope we can have some more detailed discussions on this topic in the near future. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Munson.
I want to follow what Councilor McKim just said. The Food and Beverage Tax Advisory Commission, which my fellow councilors asked me to serve on again, will soon have its annual report for 2021. It is the city's turn this year to prepare the report. So, so I'm helping the city representative do this because he's brand new to the tax commission. And when the report is ready, the tax commission will meet, and then we will, according to ordinance, come back and make a presentation of that to all of you. And I certainly think that everybody involved with the process of collecting the taxes and measuring where we're going to go in the future is anxious to start the process again and work towards a real expansion of the convention center for all.
Thank you. Councilor Hawk.
Yes, as you might know, I've been following along what's going on at the state level regarding this legislation as well. And I think what has even brought this about is because different counties, different communities have been collecting this money from the people and not providing what they said they were going to. And they even mentioned one, it'd gone on for, it was like decades or something. They kept collecting it and they never did provide what they said they were going to collect the money for. So I think that you know, putting our feet to the fire and saying, folks, either do it or quit collecting it. And I've been saying that for a while. It is not right to collect money from the public and say this is what it's for. And 4 or 5 years later, we haven't been able to move forward. And it had nothing to do, for somebody said it had to do with the COVID. No, it's because people cannot seem to agree on what we're going to do. So I think whether you're in favor of growing the convention center or not, the money's being collected. Now, it's not fair to keep collecting it if we're not going to do with it what we said we were going to. And the other thing to watch at the state level, folks, is that over 65, oh yes, I'm interested in people over 65, they've raised if this goes through, as it's being presented and has been voted on, the value, the assessed value, the market value of the property can be like 300,000 instead of 200,000. That's going to open up the doors for so many more folks who can receive that over 65 circuit breaker. Huge help to them. So folks, everybody try to support that. And hopefully that gets signed by the governor. I mean, there's still a lot of sausage being made, but that has got to happen. We have too many people who are really up against it. And with our market values that had jumped through the roof, even the entry-level homes are over 200,000. So thank you, state, for that help. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Counselor Munson.
Hold on just a minute. There we go. I think the important thing for all of us to appreciate is that we were close to resolving differences between the city and county when the pandemic began. And during the pandemic, the county used some of its food and beverage tax revenue to support the businesses in the county that were paying the tax, collecting the tax and submitting it. And I know this was a huge help to them and helped keep them in business. So our money, that is the county share, let's say roughly 10% of the total collected, is not for convention center development. Instead, it is for tourism and economic development. Thank you.
Good reminder. Counselor Deckard.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate very much what both Counselor McKim and Counselor Munson have brought up here. And I want to just add my voice to that chorus on this discussion. And if that gives strength to the idea, then so be that. If it doesn't, then ignore it. But here's what I would only add to that is we have a very unique community. And I think everyone can agree on this, no matter what they think politically or otherwise. This is a location, this county, this city, this area. This is a place where people want to be. And we as a community have that as a benefit over many other locations. And I hate to say that about other locations, but that's true. People want to be here. And so that's not going to change. We don't want that to change. If that does change, we have other headaches. I think it is time to get moving on this. I think that we do have to look forward to our future. We have committed to that tax, collecting that tax. As Counselor Munson has pointed out very well, that tax has been an aid in this pandemic time, which is now again on 2 years running. But just like, the daffodils that are starting to come up in my yard, a new day is potentially blooming for us. And if we keep doing the right things and watching to the right horizon, we've got better days ahead. So I think it's time. And I appreciate very much Counselor McKim bringing this up today. I think it was time for that to be said a little bit more publicly. And I appreciate his leadership.
Thank you. Does anyone else have comment to share this evening? Okay. In that case, thank you all for persevering. And this is adjourned. Take care.
Thank you all.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.